Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Critical Podcast. I am your host, Jimmy Good, and joining me this week is incredibly special guest, the host of the Great Game Debate, Kaedhen. Kaedhen, how you doing, buddy?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me on, man. I'm really excited to be here.
Uh, I'm stoked to have you. Last time you were here with Wes, and that was
hmm
back a couple months ago, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Now?
it was before we started our podcast because
Yeah.
since we were on your podcast, it gave us the podcasting bug. So we kind of owe that to you. But so
Ah.
it's probably been a few months by now.
Yeah, well, I really
I'd be
do
back.
recommend anybody who's listening to this to go check them out. They're fantastic, and I got to be on one of the episodes. So if you're looking for like an inroad, like maybe you could start there. It was an emotional episode. The guys pooled together and bought one of the other members of PlayStation 5,
hmm
or as a community. It was beautiful. But anyway, Kaden, it's so great to have you back, and I wanted to have you here today to kind of fill in a blind spot for me. More often than not on this channel, I'm the guy reviewing stuff. I've only ever let other people review things or talk about them on the channel that I haven't played or seen myself. So this is
Sure.
kind of a fun treat for me because I'm like I get to learn something here. But today we're talking about Monster Hunter Rise, the Switch. It was exclusive, but then is coming to PC eventually. I don't know exactly
hmm
when that is. But Monster Hunter Rise, I played the demo. I played with you.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
we got to get in a little bit of time. I have a little footage from that. A great Rathian just diving
I was
straight into
gonna
the
I was
ground.
hoping you'd bring that up.
Oh yeah, baby. There's some great little bugs, like just adorable kind of bugs, especially in the demo
Yeah.
like that. You're like, oh, it's okay. And then later on down the line, I didn't realize this. They updated the demo, threw in
hmm
Magnum and it was like, all right, go fight this guy. And I was like, wow, like it's cool to see demos get updates. I don't know, it just seems like a weird thing, but I like it a
Yeah.
lot. But anyway, so that's my experience with this game.
Sure.
So not much at all, right? But you have
Still
gone through.
green.
Yeah, I'm still very green. So you've played through the entirety of Rise, and let's just
Yes.
start at the very beginning. Like, how many hours have we put into this game so far?
So I essentially would, I guess you'd say, like mainline the game or
Okay.
like, crit pathed it.
Yeah, yeah.
So didn't do a whole lot of farming. I basically made like one set of armor from like a weak monster in low rank and then just kept upgrading that armor with armor spheres to increase its defense to carry me through low rank, got to high rank, did the same thing, just made a pseudo armor from a weak monster in high rank, and then kept upgrading it to carry me through to the final boss in high rank. So obviously you can put a lot more time into this game. I think I've seen people have already put like 80 to 100 hours into it and haven't beaten it yet. But the way I played it, just crit pathing it basically, I think I clocked in just over 50 hours.
Okay.
So still pretty meaty even if you're crit pathing it.
Yeah, totally. And for a Switch game that isn't like your classic turnstile based RPG or something like Breath of the Wild, that's
Mm,
pretty long
yeah.
for some of the games that I've seen that have gone onto Switch. Not to say all the games, but that's nice that there's like you're right, it is kind of meaty. And also, we got to know too, like what weapon do you typically main? Is it the same one? These are like we got to get these base questions in there before this will help, influence us going forward.
For sure. I traditionally have used Greatsword through the Monster Hunter games, and I, through circumstances, had the opportunity to experiment with other weapons in World because I spent about 80 hours on World. My save data got corrupted and I had to start over.
Oh
So then I was
yeah!
like, well, let me just do it with a different weapon this time. So then I used bow and beat the game on PS4 with bow. So then I was a bow main.
Wow.
And then the game came out on PC, and then a friend of mine wanted to play it with me, and I was like, anything for the Monster Hunter cause, got to convert those newbies. So then I had a third chance to do a new weapon. So then I decided to give Lance a try, and I just got really, really, really hooked on Lance, and then played that through Iceborne, and then I just went right into Rise with Lance. So I guess for now I'm a Lance main.
That is so cool. And I think I've asked you this before, but any interest in the gun lance?
I do. It seems like the next. There's certain weapons like Charge Blade and Switch Axe and Gun Lance that just seem like really technical and they kind of like scare you off a little bit. So I'm just so comfy with Lance because it's just like some like veterans in the community literally call Lance easy mode because the shield is just so powerful, just blocking almost anything. So you lose a little bit of that defensiveness with the gun lance for the increased offensiveness and the technicality of the shelling attacks. So I've been, toying with the idea of giving it a shot, but it didn't help my cause that recently Wes started Monster Hunter Rise, and he was like, "Well, I made bow and world. Let me try a new weapon." And he was like, "Let me give Gunlance a shot." And I think he tried Gunlance for one quest for about 3 minutes, and then he just quit the quest and switched back to bow. He hated it so much, and I was like, "Good lord."
That's
But
rough.
yeah, I've been meaning to.
Okay, well, cool. So your Lance main, you've put in over 50 hours, 55-ish or whatever, and
Mhm.
you've played a bunch of the games in the past. You're, like you were kind of alluding to there, you're a Monster Hunter fan before even World. Like, you've
Mhm.
been around for a long time. What was your first one?
So the first one, this was the first time the series even came to my sphere of consciousness, was Monster Hunter Try, because I got to get
Okay.
weird with the names. It can't even be called Monster Hunter 3. But
Yeah.
that game, interestingly, I learned recently that it was originally meant to be a PS2 game because Monster Hunter 1 and 2 are on the PS2.
Ah,
And then in the middle of the development, the Wii came out and just exploded. And everybody and their mom had a Wii, so they pivoted and switched development to the Wii. And back in the day, I guess I must have been in middle school, but I had the Nintendo Power subscription, getting
nice.
those monthly magazines,
Very
and they had a
nice.
spread one month for Monster Hunter Try, and I was just like, oh my god, I've just never seen anything like this. Just a game about killing dinosaurs with giant weapons, and every fight is just a boss battle. Like, whoa! So I took the plunge and never looked back.
That's beautiful. Okay, so you're going into Rise, obviously, with this kind of tenure behind you, whereas someone like me, I'm just like a Monster Hunter World convert. So for me, like with the demo that we played, I was like, this looks interesting. I still kind of dabble with World from time to time. I haven't beaten the, as we've discussed off air, the kind of, how should I put it, unfair final bosses in that game. It's like one
Yeah, me
shotting,
neither.
like it's kind of ridiculous, and it's nice to hear like from a veteran such as yourself. You're like, yeah, man, that's maybe a waste of time, or like you're
Yeah,
just like,
it's just
like,
for the bragging rights, you
yeah,
know.
it's you're like, I got it, I got the armor. It's like, now what? And you're like, I'm an alpha predator, like an apex predator now.
Yeah, pretty
But
much. Yeah.
now that we're into this, it seems like this game, and from what I understand with Monster Hunter, is that they typically have a few different teams working on these games at any given
Mhm.
time. They have your kind of your main line, which World was the last kind of mainline one, and then kind of the offshoots that are made in tandem or kind of parallel to them. They don't necessarily talk or necessarily like work together, but this was one of those games, and it just happened to
Right.
come out a few years after World. They kind of leapfrog, and then there's also like these other kind of like story games or story-based Monster Hunter games that
Yeah.
are completely different. They're nothing like Monster Hunter at all. But this is kind of
Mhm.
like the next one for that. So for anybody out there, if you were like me, maybe at first you're like, wait, is this a sequel? Not really. It's just
Right.
like kind of the next one that's moving alongside the other ones. But the two biggest things, and there, you could probably speak to if there are more than this, but the two biggest things that I noticed from my time with the demo were thus the two kind of new mechanics. One being a little bit, just a little bit interesting, kind of fun. One being like actually kind of more of a game-changing element. Let's start with what I think every Monster Hunter should have from now on, which is, and maybe game-breaking, depending how you look at it, but the Palamutes.
The good
Or the
boys.
good boys. Maybe not game breaking. Maybe just kind of the
Well, kind of game breaking.
yeah. Depending on
We'll get into it.
yeah, yeah, you can tell me, but like for my time in the demo, it was just like kind of sped things up. So for people who don't know, Monster Hunter, you usually have these things called palicos. They're cat-like creatures. They're bipedal, and they help you out in combat. They'll heal you. They'll attack. They'll do other stuff. Palamutes, which are, I believe, brand new to this game,
Hmm.
are basically like these husky wolf fox hybrids that can attack like by your side, but also you can ride on them. You can drink potions while you're on them. You can sharpen your weapons while you're riding on them. Probably can do other things. Maybe buy me an apartment. I don't know. It seems like they can do pretty much whatever you want them to. But for you, like getting into it, having the ability to do things that were stationary activities usually, now you can do them on the move.
Hmm.
Did that feel like that was cheating? Did it feel cool? Was it like I'm sharpening my lance on the back of a dog? Like, it seems kind of strange, but like, what was it like? How did you feel about him?
I now that I've beaten the game, do have kind of mixed feelings on them. It does at the same time feel like you can't imagine playing Monster Hunter without the Palamutes, but they
Sure.
also do seem kind of broken. The just the ability to literally jump on the dog and run in a circle around the monster, and the dog runs fast enough and is maneuverable enough that the monsters just cannot touch you when you're on the dog. It's just like a get out of jail free card. And so we'll get into it more later, but part of the functionality of the wire bug is when you're knocked into the air by a monster's attack. In past games, that leaves you recovering, standing back up on your feet, vulnerable for a couple seconds, and gives the monster an opportunity to combo attack you. But in this game, you can just fling out your wire bug and zip away in midair after you get knocked into the air, and then just hop right onto your dog. So it
Okay.
becomes this routine. The monster hits you once, you zip away, jump on your dog, and run a circle around the monster while you're healing yourself, drinking a potion on the back of your dog. So the monsters just never hit you more than one time in a row anymore without you being able to heal,
Wow.
unless they like stun you and incapacitate you in some way. But I guess my feelings on the Palamutes are kind of like I'm more in favor of the ease of traversal of the environments that they grant you, and I'm a little bit iffy on how easy they make the combat itself. So um, I just don't. I don't think people would want the Palamutes to go away in further games because they're just so convenient to run around the maps and
Sure.
get to where you need to go in a timely manner. And it would just really suck not to have that. But I think the solution wouldn't be to kind of roll back what you can do with the Palamute, but to I guess the way I put it recently to someone was it feels like the hunters are learning too many new tricks and the monsters aren't learning any new tricks.
Hmm.
So I think the solution would be to somehow evolve what the monsters are capable of to try to keep up with your capabilities on the Palamute. But well, before I get into more stuff, if you have any thoughts on
Yeah,
that,
well, I think we just give all the monsters Palamutes too. They can ride them
there you
too.
go.
You
Yeah,
like you
yeah.
knock over a monster and before it falls over, it like calls one in. Is
Mhm.
it really difficult to pull off the wire bug? I'm knocked in the air. I use the wire bug to throw myself onto the Palamute. Is that a difficult thing to do? Does it have to be placed properly, or do you just have to hit like two buttons?
So all you have to do to actually, they call it the wire fall. That's the aerial recovery when you get knocked into the air. All you got to do is press left trigger and the evade button, which I think is B on the Switch. And that's it. As long as you have a wire bug. If you've been going really crazy with your wire bugs and they're all on cooldown, then you can't do it.
Hmm.
So that is something to consider, but most of the time you have them. And then the Palicos actually have, not Palicos, Palamutes have AI settings. Um, the two main ones that people seem to use are either a pincer attack or stay close to you. So the pincer attack is useful because it can cause the monster to get distracted from you if the Palico is attacking it from the other side of you.
Hmm.
But I use the AI to keep the Palamute close to me. So it just prioritizes staying as close to me as possible. So that way, when I do the wire fall, the Palamute's right there. And then all you have to do to get on the dog is just hold A, and like a meter fills up, and then you hop on the dog. And there's even an option in the options menu to make that timer shorter, so you can even get on the dog even faster. So yeah, it's really just left trigger B, zip away, hold down A, and then you're on the dog. It's not like a high level skill ceiling thing like anyone can do it.
Sure. Yeah. And is it something where it's
Yeah.
like an animation where you like land on it, or is it like you land on the ground and then it's just like you're on it?
Right, yeah. So there's
Okay.
not a special animation to zip directly to the dog. It's
Okay.
just you zip back onto your feet, and then the dog's next to you, and then you mount the dog. So
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, you're kind of alluding to it there, and that was going to be the kind of the bigger thing I wanted to talk about here, because with
mhm.
Palamutes, you can kind of have these traversal options that it sounds like they can kind of like run up the sides of certain
Mhm.
cliffs and things like that. But now
Yeah.
we're introducing the thing that It's pretty crazy, and if they combined it with my beloved Clutch Claw, you'd
Hmm.
make the greatest
Rip
video
Clutch Claw.
game. Yeah, the greatest video game tool of all time, which is that of the wire bug. Now, I have a very basic understanding of the wire bug, but I think it'd be better to come from an expert. So, what the heck is a
Sure.
wire bug? Like, what?
So mechanically, the wire bug is essentially just a grappling hook that doesn't need to attach to anything. It just can attach to a point in midair. And I guess the way they tried to justify that in lore is it's a bug. So instead of having a hook at the end of a rope, it's a bug at the end of a rope that flies into the air and then jerks you forward behind it. Um, but the wire bug's function is twofold. It's used for ease of traversal, but it's also used for pulling off special combat moves that are different for each weapon. And you have a specific amount of wire bugs. By default, it's two. And each wire bug is on a cooldown. So if you're using your wire bug to zip around and traverse the environment really quickly around the monster, then you won't necessarily have them to pull off your special moves and vice versa. And what you do with the wire bugs also affect its cooldown. So just using it to zip around has the shortest cooldown. But if you use the same amount of wire bugs for a special move for your weapon, it takes longer to get the wire bug back. So
Okay, cool. And it sounds like, or at least from what I remember playing, the one of the big things, and you kind of talked about this a little bit, I think on social media. You said like the counterattacks can be really cool or
mm,
really not great depending on which
yeah.
weapon you have. And in your experience as a lance user, maybe not so great.
Right, yeah. So when you get into the whole traversal thing in the environments, which is I think where the wire bugs really shine, but they call the combat maneuvers they use the wire bugs for silk bind attacks, and they feel just really, really hit or miss depending on which weapon or even within a weapon. Some of them are obviously more useful than others, and it's just kind of weird because I don't know, like I obviously am biased on Monster Hunter, but especially in World, it just feels like that game is just polished to like a razor edge in terms of the gameplay. It's just everything feels perfect and has a use, and the skill ceiling is just so high, and so it just feels weird coming from that to Rise and just having some of the moves just literally being useless. Maybe I'm being too harsh, but just to give an example, and we can get into this more later too, but kind of the other gameplay gimmick in this game, besides the palamutes and the wire bugs, are what they call switch skills. So every weapon has three moves in its move set that is able to be switched out for a different one. And one of those moves for each weapon is one of its silkbind attacks.
Okay.
So the Lance's Silkbind attacks, its default ones. There's one where you pull out a kunai, because that makes sense, I guess, because I don't want to use my lance for my super special attack. I want to use a kunai. You pull out a kunai and you jab it into the monster, and then you're attached to that monster by a rope of silk from the wire bug, and that itself doesn't do any damage. And then while you're attached to the monster like that, at any point, if you hold left trigger and B, you like zip through the air towards the monster and land like right at its feet. So I think the idea is there's this weird misconception by a lot of people about Lance that it's immobile. And, I won't get too into it, but basically, if you learn the entire moveset of the Lance, it's actually really mobile and you can get to where you need to be really fast with it. But I think that's their attempt to kind of, fix that perceived problem because you can just zip right to the monster. Um, but again, zipping to the monster doesn't do any damage itself. And doing that Silkbind attack costs two of your wire bugs and puts them on a long cooldown. So you lose the ability to wire fall and maneuver quickly and you're not doing any meaningful damage to the monster, and it uses both your wire bugs. So
And
you're like,
yeah.
oh god,
And I
go
was
ahead,
gonna
sorry.
say, and on top of all this, just side note, I think from what you told me, you can't mount monsters normally in a game. So for people who are gonna say, "Oh, it jumps you to them, and then you can hit them in the air, it helps to do the mounting," you can't do that. Just want to put that out there.
Yeah,
Continue.
so this is my other problem with the lance is none of its wire bug attacks do a lot of damage, and the wire bug attacks damage is what triggers mounting in this game. So some of the weapons, like the hunting horn, that have massive silkbind attacks that just do a ton of damage. Like I think some of the late game or in game hunting horns, if you just hit a monster once with one of its silkbind attacks, it's ready to be mounted.
Wow.
But with the lance, you just don't have that functionality, so you're not mounting nearly as often. But I guess I don't have to describe all the other lance silkbind attacks, but they're equally as useless. And then you
Sorry.
contrast that with, for example, a weapon like the Charge Blade. Just a quick rundown of how the Charge Blade works. It has a sword and shield mode. You attack with the sword, you fill up energy in your sword, and then you store the energy in your shield, which doubles as an axe head, and then you can transform the sword and shield into a giant axe. And while you've got the energy stored in the shield, it does a bunch of extra damage and other effects. That's like really cool. So anyway, one of the silkbind moves for the charge blade is a counter. So you just throw up your shield, and if the monster hits you at all during a generous window that lasts several seconds, it just immediately fills up all your energy. So the main bread and butter damage dealer of the charge blade is this move called the ultra amped element discharge that expends all of your stored energy for a huge burst of damage. So the way this works now is you do your super attack, you just do your counter move, boom, you got all your energy back, you do your super attack again, and you just keep doing it. And that only costs one wire bug to even do it. So you can do it in quick succession, and then by the time you use it twice in a row, your first one's off cooldown. So this is kind of the deal with the wire bug attacks. It's like some of them are just literally useless. Like I love the lance. I'm a lance main. I beat the whole game with it. I think the lance is awesome, but I literally don't use the silkbind attacks ever. And then other silkbind attacks are just completely broken. So
Yeah, and like we talked
know.
about with the hunting horn during like the demo, that they're like people were using it because it was like one of the only weapons they could use to effectively beat Magnum Hollow in that time
Yeah.
frame. Maybe they're doing the same thing with the charge blade because like the numbers were way down on both those weapons or something, especially hunting
It could
horn
be, yeah.
in like previous titles, and they're like, just make them ridiculous and people will maybe try. I'm like, come on, we've made these like 14 weapons and there's a couple that nobody want to use, and it's just like, well, a couple people want to use
I
them.
really can't fault them for that. You know, if at the end of the day, the unbalanced nature of the wire bug attacks got more people to use hunting horn, which I think it has. Like, I feel like I've seen more people on social media and people that I play the game with multiplayer using the hunting horn than any other weapon, which is crazy because it was the least used weapon in World, and I think it's traditionally been the least used weapon. And the second least used weapon has traditionally been Lance, so now Lance is
Oh.
dead last. So.
I'm sorry. So that okay. So
There's
that
dozens
means
of us.
so Monster Hunter World 2 means the lance will rise from the
Maybe.
ashes as the greatest.
Maybe.
They'll be like, oh yeah, you can just like so you just stab your lance into its head and then you jump on it. And you can steer it around for a while. It's so nice. Well, yeah, and you know we kind of touched on it a little bit too with the wire bugs, and I wanted to ask you. We talked like the traversal that you can kind of move up and you can move to the side and do different things, or you know catch yourself when you're falling backwards and things like that.
Yeah.
You know, if you're not really using the wire bug attacks so much, did you find yourself using the wire bug for evasion at all?
Well, the problem is
You got the
you
lance.
can only use the evasion maneuvers of the wire bug when your weapon's sheathed. So if
Oh,
I'm
never mind.
approaching the monster with my lance out and it attacks me and I see the attack coming and I want to evade with the wire bug, I just can't because it's going to take me a second to sheath my weapon and then evade. So
Plus, you have the lance, so you just block it anyway.
exactly.
It's just like,
yeah. Exactly.
okay. So like you're not really living that like complete Spider-Man fantasy. Like you're kind of using it more for like traversing just the environment, not necessarily the fights. And from what I've seen with some videos, especially like the joke videos that you and I share back and forth, a lot of them seems like it's like people using 2 or 3 wire bugs like in tandem to land just like one attack, and it's like all this work is like 27 damage. And it's like, and I'm thinking like in Monster Hunter World terms, I'm like, I could have put out a lot of damage by then.
Now, I will say that it does depend on the weapon because some of the wire bug moves for different weapons are more focused on maneuverability.
Okay.
So the bow guns come to mind. I see a bunch of people using the light bow gun, and you do this move where you essentially shoot yourself directly up in the air and somersault over the top of the monster, and then you can shoot like a mine downward onto it,
Cool.
and you just sail completely over the top of the monster. So that's an example of one that you can use while your weapon's out because it's specifically designed for evasion. But
Nice.
like the lance, not all weapons are afforded such a
They're not all created
accommodation.
equal. It's not,
Yeah.
that's not fair. I gotta know. Does the mine explode just by itself, or do you have to shoot it again? It's like the gun lance mine thing.
I think you have to shoot it again, or the monster has to hit it.
Okay,
But obviously,
that's
if
cool. Your
you
bowgun.
manage to attach it to the monster, then you just keep shooting explosive rounds at it, and the mine
Right.
explodes. The
It'll go off.
monster gets knocked over.
That's so
So,
great. Also, does the hunting knife? Can you use the wire bug with the hunting knife out? Because I know that's in the world. That was like the one thing that like you could drink a potion while it was like out with the short like the sword and the shield like the little one. It's like you could do
oh,
that. I'm not sure if you
that's
can
a
do
really
that.
good question. I would assume not
Okay.
because the way the controls work is the same exact inputs you use to use the traversal abilities of the wire bug when your weapon is sheathed are the same controls you use to use the silk bind attacks when your
Okay.
weapon is unsheathed.
Gotcha.
So I think not, but I
Probably
could be
no.
wrong about that.
Yeah, and okay, and you also mentioned something too here that I was unfamiliar with. I kind of like I only knew about the counter attacks was kind of like the big thing for me, and with
Mhm.
my with my longsword, and maybe the longsword counter is really good. I was
It
not good with
is.
it. I just was like, I was triggering at the wrong time. I have been really bad with counters with that weapon, which is not a good thing because that weapon is all about the counters. Heck, the first like 100 hours of Monster Hunter World, I didn't realize I could switch direction in the air with my Spirit Helm Splitter. I was like, you can hit it again and turn. I was like, I just like almost stepped away from the controller. I was like, I just don't even. There's always so much I'm learning. But anyway, these kind of switchable arts and skills.
Mhm.
Talk to me about that. Like, I want to know about this.
So these are also something I have a lot of mixed feelings about. It's just gonna be a running theme with
Just
this game. But
all of it.
okay, so the idea of switch skills are really cool, and of course, I totally don't blame you for not even having heard of them because they weren't actually available in the demo.
Okay.
Yeah, so um, every weapon, like I said, has three switch skills. Two of them are moves that are in your normal move set, and one of them swaps out one of your wire bug attacks, the silkbind attacks. So one thing that's kind of disappointing about the switch skills is you can't decide what you want to switch out for the switch skill. It's predetermined. So it makes more sense for the regular moves in the combo, but it makes less sense for the Silkbind attacks. So the third ability for the Lance, for example, the switch skill for the Silkbind attack, it is this maneuver called I don't remember what it's called, but you shoot out a wire bug in any direction you choose, and then you hold your lance out and zip directly in that um, direction on the x-axis, and then you pick another direction and do it again.
Cool.
So the three moves for the lance are the one where you attach it to the monster, then there's a counter where if the monster hits you, it raises your attack for a few seconds, and then there's this other third one. Well, you can't choose which of the other two Silkbind attacks you want to swap out for the third one. It's always the counter. So you like I can't get rid of the useless kunai like attach skill. Like I would clearly switch that one out because it's so much worse. Like I still barely ever use the counter attack because the lance itself has a counter built into its normal moveset that's better, but I still would prefer to have that and the third one and completely get rid of the other one, but they just don't let you.
Weird.
And the other problem I have with this is um, so, for example, take the Charge Blade in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. In that game, they added new functionality to all the weapons when Iceborne came out.
Mm.
And what they added to the Charge Blade was called Savage Axe Mode. And previously, you could charge your stored energy in either your sword or your shield. And now when you charge it into your shield in Iceborne, once your shield is charged up with the energy, you can trigger this mode called Savage Axe mode, where when you turn into the axe mode, the axe head turns into a buzzsaw and it like hits the enemy like way more times, and it's like way
Sick.
more powerful. So the way they did in Iceborne was they just baked that into the the move set for the charge blade. So they didn't take anything away for you to be able to do that. It's just added functionality. So instead, in Rise, one of the switch skills is one of the like default, like bread and butter basic abilities for the charge blade, which is once you've charged energy into your shield, you can then sheathe the sword into the shield and transfer the energy into the sword blade. And that's really good because it causes the sword to do extra damage and become undeflectable by monster armor.
Cool.
But the switch skill replaces that ability with the Savage Axe mode. So in Iceborne, you can do both, but in Rise, you have to choose one or the other. And it's just like,
That's weird.
yeah. So on top of those two gripes, so far it just seems like there's always clearly a better option for the switch skills. Like if you're just wanting to perform the best and or be meta or do the most damage and you don't care about how cool you look, like you just it's clear which move is just better, and so it just kind of feels like what's even the point, you know?
Sure,
But
it's not really like a reflection of you as a player or what your style is. It's just like this is just clearly an almost like objectively best choice comparatively
yeah.
to what else you can choose, which that's too bad.
Yeah, so kind of like the wire bugs, the switch skills just kind of feel like an interesting idea that just needs more polish, more editing. You know, it seems like they didn't. I don't know. They just didn't put enough time into working them out to make them feel meaningful. But you know, just on a base level, you know, they're fun. You know, it's fun to do them. It's fun to use them. But once you figure out that one's just better, you just stop using them because you never switch anymore. But
Sure, because you've like
you know,
slotted that in. It seems like they just need the more functionality where they allow you to actually switch things out so you can get rid of the thing you hate
mhm.
instead of being like, I have to take this. And like you said with the Iceborne stuff, like coming from Iceborne, and maybe a lot of people on Switch didn't come from Iceborne. I think some did though, and it's kind of difficult, but they don't know what they're missing. Whereas like
Yeah,
you clearly
that's
know,
definitely
and
an element for sure.
you're like, yeah, I used to have all this stuff in World, and it's like they took something away from me and they gave me this weird thing that I don't really like, and they're like, but
Right.
here it's new functionality, and you're like, not the way I want it. Like,
Right. So
it's
yeah,
kind of
just
weird.
put an asterisk in front of everything I just said and say if Rise is your first game, you're not going to notice or care.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. You probably really like it, potentially. But yeah. Oh, another thing I did forget to kind of mention or talk about a little bit: wire bugs, mounting the monster, not really mounting, kind of like rotating, kind of like
yeah.
controlling the monster, which in the demo was my favorite part. I oh my gosh, actually flying a Rathian for a little bit was
Right.
was great, or just kind of going around with that. And that can be kind of something you can use for a little while to attack other monsters. You can, I think it's like 2 or 3 times you can ram a monster into a wall or something
Mhm.
like that. I thought that was such a cool thing to do, and it seems like it's a big thing in this game, especially if you're hunting and fighting a
For
monster
sure.
that's hard, and you're like, I'll go grab another one, and well, I'll be back. Because you
Yeah.
get like 45 seconds or a minute on these things. I think something like that. It felt like a long
Yeah.
time
It's
to
pretty
come back
long.
and do it. Did you use that? Like, because you said you're not really like you weren't using the wire bug stuff as much. Did that still pop up for you occasionally?
Yeah, so I know I've been sounding pretty negative on the game so far, but overall I still really like it, and this is one of the things that I really do think is a cool addition. Kind of in tandem with this is the new Hunter Helper Endemic Life system. So just quickly in Monster Hunter World, there's special endemic life that you can interact with that affects the monster. Like you might find like a poisonous toad, and if you can get the monster to stand over the toad, you can kick the toad, and it releases a poisonous cloud that you know poisons the monster. Well, they took it one step further in Rise, and now you can pick up these creatures and put them in your pocket and take them with you and deploy them whenever and wherever you want. So
Perfect.
that's important because there are two specific hunter helpers that are really good for mounting monsters, which affected me because the Lance sucks at mounting monsters with its Silkvine move. So I'm really glad there's another way to get around that. One of them is called a puppet spider, and if you use the spider, it shoots out a ball of webbing at a monster, and it just always 100% of the time automatically makes the monster mountable.
Cool.
And the other is called a stink mink. It's basically like a skunk. And if you use the skunk, it covers you in a pheromone that the monster cannot resist, and it chases you. I don't know if it's wanting to mate with you or kill you. Let's not think too hard about it. But
Fair enough. Fair enough.
this is interesting too because in World, you remember they had turf wars where sometimes if two monsters ended up in the same area, they'd fight each other, and it was so cool. You just pull out your bag of popcorn, take a seat, and just watch it go down.
So good.
You're not sure who's gonna win. Um, well, what's different about turf wars and Rise is it seemed like they had kind of like a percentage chance of like happening in World, and you were never sure if they were going to happen or not. Well, in Rise, they just always happen. So if two monsters end up in the same area, they always fight. So if you can't get a puppet spider, but you can get a stink mink, you get the monster to chase you into the area of another monster, and then they fight. And whenever monsters fight each other, whichever monster hits the other monster first instantly makes it mountable. So that's two ways you can just instantly mount the monster. So that was a roundabout way to get to your to your question about whether or not the mounting system in this game is good. But now that we've mounted a monster,
Yeah.
this is just a huge gameplay addition that a lot of fans have dreamt about in the past, of being able to pilot the monster. So in this game, when you mount the monster, you cover its body in silk ropes that work like puppet strings and allow you to control the monster. And what's really interesting about this is you have like complete access to the entire monster's move sets through button combinations. And let me tell you, you just have not lived until you've shot a giant laser beam out of a Rajang's mouth at another monster.
Oh, that sounds incredible.
Yeah.
I hate Rajang so much, but I would probably love him if I could use the laser beam.
I mean, even if he's not your quest target, but he's in the map, it's like, hey, let's go get a Rajang, knock the crap out of the target monster. So what's interesting about this is if you are piloting a monster, one of the things you can also do is ram it into a wall or another monster. And if you ram a monster into another monster, this is another way that automatically makes the monster that's getting rammed mountable. Okay. So this is kind of like the flow of a normal hunt for me. Go out into the field, get a puppet spider or stink mink, mount one monster that's not my quest target, run him over to my quest target, beat the crap out of him with the monster I'm piloting, then finish off by ramming him into my quest target. Now he's mountable. I jump on him. Then I run him across the map to the third monster in the map, and then ram him into that monster and jump off, and then jump onto that monster, then use that monster to beat the crap out of my actual quest target. So by now he's taking like thousands of points of damage from two monsters. And then I jump off the monster, and now the hunt's actually started, you know? And it's just free damage, and it's super fun. I think it can be a little bit intimidating and confusing on how to maneuver the monster, but
yeah,
you know obviously learn that through experience. So yeah, I don't really have anything bad to say about this system. It's just really fun, and you can interact with it or not. You know, it's really helpful if you take advantage of it during a hunt. Oh, and one last thing is, when you attack a monster with another monster while you're mounting it, it drops extra monster parts. So it's also just a good way to like farm monsters. Yeah, just really cool. Yeah,
that's fantastic. Okay, follow-up question that I'm thinking about, like all the possibilities of monsters here. That laser beam from Rajang, is that hitting once or multiple times? Is that
multiple times?
Oh,
yeah.
baby.
So okay, it gets more broken. Any fan of an action game has
yes
heard of the term animation canceling, which is ironic because that's normally a term you don't hear when people are talking about Monster Hunter. But when you're piloting a monster, you still have access to your wire bugs, and the way they function while you're piloting a monster is to do something called an emergency evade. So at any time, you can press the analog stick in any direction and hit B, and your monster is jerked quickly to that side. But the thing about it is you can interrupt any animation the monster can do in any of its attacks by doing the emergency evade. So the way it goes with Rajang normally, you shoot the laser hits the monster once, but the animation for the laser keeps firing the laser without doing any damage for a couple seconds. Then the laser dissipates, and then Rajang roars, and he shakes his head, and then he's over it, and then you can fire the laser again. But with the magic of animation canceling, fire the laser, instantly dodge the side, fire the laser, instantly dodge the side, fire the laser, and it's like 1,000 damage, and it's just.
Yes.
And now the thing is, that probably takes like a quarter of your timer to ride the monster. So even when you run out of wire bugs from the evade, you just have to wait like 5 seconds or less for the cooldown to come up. And they all come back at once when you're on the monster. And then you just do it again. So it's just so much free damage with like impunity. Like there's
Wow.
nothing the other monster can even do to you while you're doing this. So yeah, Rajang's just like before he was just this like sort of beloved by the fan base for how much of a pain in the ass he was to fight. Just totally like he's the real skill check. Like you have to know what you're doing to fight him because he's so aggressive and mobile. But in this game, he's also just like the ultimate weapon. You know, like
So great. So you're using this laser beam, and it's like you hit him once with it. You're ticking damage, and then you're like, I'm gonna do it again and again and
yeah,
again. So
gotta
he's
get
become like your little Death Star. Like you can just kind
exactly.
of fire him, but like as much as you want. And you're right, because back in Monster Hunter World, we like as a team. We'd be like, oh god, not Rajang, because like Rajang is like, you're right, he hits so hard and he's so mobile, but like this new element has shifted it where it's like, yeah, but now all of that stuff is for me,
Mm.
like, and that is great.
What's really funny about Rajang in this game is whenever he's an additional monster who's not your primary quest target in a map, he always is just asleep. And he will sleep through the entire hunt unless you wake him up. But when you wake him up, he's just a holy terror who just comes after you relentlessly, revenge for, ending his nap. But like,
Oh,
joke's on him because you just mount him and fire his laser. But
yep.
now, one thing that's a little bit contentious about the mounting system in this game is there's just a hard limit on mounting. Like once you mount the monster in old games, um, basically the monster has a hidden meter, like a gauge that you're filling up with mounting damage every time you hit it with a aerial attack or whatever. And once you mount the monster once, you can still mount it again, but the gauge the monster has gets bigger, like it's becoming more resistant to mounting. But you can still mount a monster like 2, 3, 4 times in a hunt if you're really persistent. But in this game, that gauge doesn't really exist. Once you mount the monster once, it's just completely immune to being mounted again for 10 minutes. And
Ugh.
like I get it because the whole Rajang laser beam thing is totally broken, and if you could just do it again and again and again.
Sure.
But the upside is, some of the harder hunts towards the late game do last longer than 10 minutes. So you mount Rajang, then you're fighting the monster 10 minutes later. You're like, oh, Rajang timer's going off. Go
Yeah.
jump on the Rajang again, unleash more lasers. So,
Oh my gosh, that's okay. I understand that. And that's kind of what we're talking about. I had said earlier, but that is one thing I love and kept trying to do in Monster Hunter World because for people who might not be as familiar, mounting monsters, at least in that game, it was kind of like you do a bunch of damage to them, and in the base game, you do a bunch of damage if you could stay on them without getting thrown off, losing your stamina. Then they'd fall to the ground, and your whole team could get free damage. And then it kind of
mhm.
shifted a little bit, like when you add the Clutch Claw and Iceborne, where you could jump on them and you weren't mounting them, but you could turn them in a direction, have them run into a wall or another monster, and that would knock them over. Again, free damage. But if I couldn't mount it every like 10 minutes, and I get where you're talking about kind of the brokenness of it, I'd be kind of sad because that's like one of the big strategies for a team is to constantly have people jumping and attacking, so you can get that mount because it's really effective. It's
That is the con to this mounting system. I do think it's extremely, extremely fun. It's a great new mechanic for new players just to get that dopamine rush and monsters fighting that's so finally here. But it definitely feels like a mechanic like in older games that they just will not carry forward. I think it's going to be just a thing that Rise has because when you compare it, as you said, to the mounting system in World, I just feel like the combat in World overall, especially when they added the Clutch Claw, feels a lot more dynamic and skill-based because it does take skill to mount a monster. It takes skill to complete the minigame to topple the monster. It takes skill to know when's the right time to clutch onto the monster with the Clutch Claw and run it into a wall and knock it over. And juggling all those things, like trying to mount the monster, mounting the monster, knocking it over, finding the opening for the Clutch Claw to knock it into a wall. It just really keeps the fight feeling really dynamic and on your toes throughout the fight, which I prefer, I think, to the mounting system in this game. Because in this game, when you mount the monster, you're just invincible. Like, the monsters cannot do anything to you, and it's just free damage. And then once it's over, it's over. And for the rest of the entire fight, it's just one-on-one on the ground. There's no more mounting. There's no Clutch Claw for toppling. So it feels a lot less dynamic. But, overall, I think I'm glad it's there because we finally get to live our fantasy of piloting monsters and making them fight each other. But I won't be sad if it doesn't come back in the next game.
Well, it's just like you're riding around on your Rathian. You've got two Palamutes because you can have like two like buddies with you. You can either have two Palicos, a Palamute, and a Palico, or two Palicos. Like that, like you have a hunting party for a party of one. Like you're like, I was one person and now I've got my two buddies and I'm riding a Rathian or whatever it's going to be. That's just so cool to me. Like we talked about beforehand, I'm working on a video for like what I'd love to see in a sequel to World 2. And I do think that there's some sort of middle ground, or there's some sort of like I can summon in, like I brought this Tobi-Kadachi back. I tranked it, brought it back, and instead of killing it in an arena later on, which seems kind of messed up, I actually befriended it, and then like I can summon it out to attack.
Oh, that's a great idea.
And then it goes away, and there's like a meter or something, like like just to summon those monsters and be like, come in, because like the idea, and just even getting to use them for a little bit. Like using Rathian's fireball or doing the poison tail thing, I was like, oh my gosh, like it felt so cool to do. And you realize how broken and why this game would never ever have a PvP where someone is a monster, because they'd have to make people like immune to being comboed, because it's just like, it's like when I like jumped back in to like get some footage for Evolve, I was like, if you know what you're doing, you could just be like, I'm gonna kill this person and not really anybody can stop me. Like it's just like, you kind of slow me down, but I'm gonna kill you. So when you're playing as like a monster in this game, you're like, yep, I could see where they would just hit you 2 or 3 times in a row if this was PvP and would not be a thing. So I'm not suggesting a player versus player thing in Monster Hunter. I'm not doing that, but yeah, I think there's some sort of like middle ground with all of these mechanics that are cool, because like it sounds like for you've enjoyed them to a certain degree, even if they're kind of broken. It's like it's almost like they have to tweak the things that are broken, but then also kind of bolster some of the lackluster things that got kind of left to the wayside for some of the weapons.
For sure.
But my other question too, I want to talk about, I only got to experience that first area where you are. And for me, I could tell, because it's the Switch, that it's obviously not going to be as detailed as something like on the Xbox One or the PlayStation 4.
Sure.
And it didn't even have, like, they got rid of the, this is one thing we talked about too, it got rid of the scout flies, and there's just like a red arrow. Is that in the main game still?
It isn't by default, actually, but I think it's an option you can just turn on for like an accessibility thing. But I guess it might as well be, because in this game, there's no tracking the monster anymore. Like once you enter the map, you just see where the monster is on your mini map, and you can go straight there. So pros and cons. I know a lot of people have a lot of different feelings on that. So
it takes the hunt out of Monster Hunter, maybe. I don't know. It's fine. And I liked the scout flies because it was a little less egregious than just like a red arrow that's like, it's over there. But, and it just kind of made this version, at least in the demo for me, feel like less of like a full-fledged experience. It's more of just like you're going to go into these arenas and they're more arenas, not like an actual world you're traversing as much. And maybe that was on purpose. Maybe it was a technical thing. But the worlds themselves, how many were there, and were there some other cool ones that I just never got to see?
Let's see. So there's the Shrine Ruins, which is the demo map.
Okay.
Flooded Forest, which is a reimagined returning map. There's a desert one that I can't remember the name of, but it's also a reimagining of an old map.
Not Wildfire West.
Right, yeah. But basically that archetype. And then there's a volcano level.
Ooh.
And an ice, like a Frost Islands level. And I think the Frost Islands and the Volcanic Caverns levels are brand new, and so are the Shrine Ruins. And then the desert and the Flooded Forest maps are like reimagining of old maps from old games. Which that was a really cool experience for me, because the Flooded Forest, I don't know if it's older than Monster Hunter 3, but that's where I first encountered it. And one of the monsters you fight in there in this game, Royal Ludroth, was a brand new monster that they made for Monster Hunter 3, and it has a really distinctive, or I don't think it's the Royal Ludroth soundtrack specifically. I think it's just the monster fighting music for the Flooded Forest, but it's really distinctive. And just going into that map and fighting Royal Ludroth and hearing that music, just like the nostalgia was just like, oh, it's really cool. But I do think this game has the best map, not in terms of graphics because it's on the Switch, but in terms of level design. So if you think about the maps in World, they do have boundaries. Like your character can't just run up walls and jump over things. Like you have to go through the prescribed paths laid out in the environment to get from area to area. But in this game, your only boundary is literally the border around the edge of the map. And then you can run up or jump over, or crawl over anything in the map.
That's cool.
In between that border. So it's led to people doing some really insane stuff. Like one of the switch skills for the gun lance, basically you just turn the lance backwards and face it behind you, and then a big like rocket jet shoots out of it and propels you forward. So people are doing this thing in some maps where from the starting position, they use the wire bug to jump like twice vertically in the air, and then they use the rocket jump ability of the gun lance to just rocket through the sky over the entire map and land right next to their target monster.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and the maps have just been designed with a lot of verticality because of the wire bug. So there's lots of cool little nooks and crannies to find. There's actually collectible lore entries that you can find. And
love some lore, baby. Let's go.
Yeah, and there's hidden hunter helpers around the map. So they also have these types of endemic life called permabuffers. They're these little colored birds.
Oh, yeah.
And if you get near them, you absorb them, and it permanently raises one of your stats during the fight, a small amount. So, kind of a thing you can do at the beginning of the map is running through it, climbing on top of cliffs and jumping over stuff to get to hidden ledges to find really good hunter helpers. But along the way, picking up these little birds that buff your stats, so that by the time you get to the monster, you've got all these hunter helpers to help you fight the monster, and your stats are way bigger. Sure. But it's just really, really fun to traverse these maps and see the verticality, and I kind of just can't imagine them regressing from this. And I did hear in an interview that they almost went back to bespoke loading zones on the entire map. So you'd have to go through a loading screen. And then World came out during the development of Rise, and they saw the reception to the open maps, and are like, all right, we cannot go. We just got to figure out how to make it work on the Switch.
Oh my gosh.
It probably would have looked a lot better, but would not have been nearly as fun.
Yeah, so, definitely
it's great.
Not.
Yeah.
So see, these are what you're saying is like some of the best map designs of any Monster Hunter in this, because of that verticality, because of the wire bug and some of the, or in the Palamute traversal options and things. For the hunter helpers, are they like palicos? What are we talking about here? What are they looking like?
So there's like all the toads from World. So there's like paratoads, poison toads, sleep toads, blast toads, There's the stink mink and the puppet spider, like I was telling you about
Okay.
earlier. There's one that's this crazy, like weird tortoise that has like an anthill on his back, and he's
Sick.
just stoically standing on top of a volcanic peak in the volcanic caverns map. And if you bother to go grab him, as long as he's in your inventory, you just can't be staggered by attacks. It's like the rock steady mantle. And
Amazing.
there's another crazy one called a lantern bug that's essentially just an overshield. So while you have the lantern bug in your inventory, you get like a special red bar over your normal HP bar that gets depleted first. And
Okay.
also, once all of its HP is depleted, it also just explodes. So,
Oh my gosh.
but you have a special pouch for hunter helpers, and you can only carry 5 of them. So you do have
Okay.
to kind of choose which ones you're picking up. Speaking on those, there's a new system in this game that I guess was probably in the demo, but I don't think I noticed it while I was playing it. But they've added elemental blights to, or rather, you can afflict them on monsters now. So in
Yes.
every past game before this, monsters can like light you on fire and you take tick damage, or they can poison you, or they can give you what's called thunder blight, which makes it easier for them to stun you and stuff like that.
Huh.
Well, certain of the hunter helpers can now do that to the monster. So you can get like a flame toad or a thunder toad, and it explodes in a puff of like electricity. Oh, okay. So this is a crazy combo, right? This is my normal hunt routine. Start the map, go get a puppet spider, a blast toad, and a thunder toad. Mount a monster, go to my quest target, beat the crap out of it with that monster, jump off while the monster is like dazed from getting the crap beat out of it by the first monster. Run over, put down a blast toad, run away from the blast. The blast toad explodes. The blast toad is always a guaranteed knockover on a monster. That
Oh.
just topples the monster. So while the monster is knocked over, whip out the thunder toad. It shoots a gob of like thunder spit at the monster and applies thunder blight on it. So what that does is any attack that hits the monster on the head causes KO damage, which normally you can only do using a blunt weapon. So while it's knocked over by the blast toad, then you run over and you stab it in the head a bunch of times with your sword or your lance or whatever, and then it gets stunned and falls over again. Then you knock the crap out of it until it stands back up, and then basically the monster's half dead by that point and hasn't had a chance to fight back. And then the hunt begins.
And then
So
you're like, all right, where's Rajang? You're like,
yeah, exactly.
let's bring this over,
So
dude. That's so cool. That's like, there's a lot more going on there versus like you said in the past with the world where you'd be like in an area and you're like, hey, there's like an electric toad. I'm gonna kick it. Like, hopefully it'll paralyze the monster if it gets close to it like long enough. You're like,
yeah.
kick it now. You know.
So I do give the game that because going into it, I thought the hunter helper thing would feel like a gimmick and I would just never use it.
Yeah,
But by the end of the game, I literally started every hunt by running around and collecting the best hunter helpers
dude.
to totally just hammer the monster with at the beginning of the fight. So I think they're a great addition, and they are really smart design because it is encouraging you to actually explore the map and make use of the verticality and the wire bug to zip around and stuff and collect them. So I think the map design and the hunter helper system synergize really well. So that's definitely one thing I really like about this game that's
Dang.
new.
That's cool. So you still are hunting something down in this game besides the big monsters. You're like hunting for little helper people, you know?
Yeah.
That's so cool. Or like buffs to yourself, which is interesting. Ah, that's so cool. You know, we've talked about this for so long, and, you know, we're not even talking about the very first word in all of this, but that's the monsters. Like, the monsters themselves. Like, we've talked about a few of them for people who might be aware of, like, you know, previous games, things like that. For you here, you know, are there a few that stand out to you, even if they aren't new necessarily? Is it just like, oh, it's good to see, you know, such and such back, you know, Barroth is here or something or whatever
Sure.
it is. Like, is there anything here that you're like, whoa, that thing was sweet, you know, that kind of thing?
Mhm. In general, I really like all the new monsters. They have this theme of the night parade of 1,000 demons or whatever it's called in Japanese mythology. So all of the new monsters are based off of yokai from Japanese mythology. And I think they're all bangers. They just look really cool. They have really interesting move sets that are really fun to fight against. Like there's this one called Bishaten, and he's based off of a Tengu. And his whole deal is he's got these big leathery wings that work like a cloak, and he pulls out fruits from inside of his wings that apply different effects. So he throws one type of fruit at you that can stun you. There's another fruit that's a poison fruit that'll poison you if he hits you. There's a paralysis fruit, and I love monsters like that are capable of inflicting multiple status effects because in older games, when you're fighting a monster with just one status effect, you just slot in a couple gems on your armor set that make you immune to it, and you never have to worry about it again. But you just don't have the capability to make yourself immune to every trick up Bishatin's sleeve. And then I think overall they chose returning monsters really well. There were a couple that seemed like an odd choice, but they actually executed really well. There's one called Basarios, which is a winged wyvern that's entire body is basically like a giant boulder, and he's really annoying in old games because basically all of your attacks just bounce off of him wherever you hit him. But they kind of reimagined him a little bit in this game and just like made him look way cooler. And during portions of the fight, he kind of powers up his body with his internal flaming energy, and it allows him to do different attacks. But the portion of his body that's powered up is like softened by the heat. So if you attack that body part, you can get through his defense, but it's like a little bit risky because you're getting closer to like, you know, where he's about to do his next attack or whatever. I think my only real gripe with the roster in this game is Duratotus. I don't know if you remember this monster. He's the big fish in the mud from Monster Hunter World. He was a new monster in Monster Hunter World, and he was like a low tier monster. It's like you fight like the first monster, Great Jagras, and then like Puke, and then Duratotus. He's like almost bottom of the food chain. And in this game, he doesn't even appear till high rank. It's like you beat low rank, and then you get to high rank, and you're like, now the real Dark Souls begins. I wonder what the first challenge is going to be. It's Duratotus. Like, what are you doing here? Nobody likes you. I think the reason they added him to the game is because one of the new monsters is a Leviathan type monster that has the ability to control mud. He can like create mud columns and stuff to obstruct you. So they're like, I guess we should throw Duratotus in there so we have more than one monster that uses mud or something.
Sure.
But yeah, in general, I'm really impressed with the roster, and I think they did a good job of choosing fan favorite old monsters. And what I'm most excited about this game is they've brought back more archetypes of monsters. So I think in World there were fanged wyverns, brute wyverns, and winged wyverns, and that was about it. There was Rajang, who was a outlier. He's technically a beast wyvern, but he's the only one in that game. Okay. But there's more beast wyverns in Rise, and there's also insectoid monsters, leviathans, which were not in Rise. I mean, they weren't in World, and I feel like I'm forgetting one other archetype. But that's just exciting because that means as time goes on and they update the game with new monsters, there's a wider variety of monsters from past games that they can pull in of those different archetypes, which they just couldn't in World because they didn't exist. But yeah.
That's so cool. I forget the name. We were talking about this one a while ago. It's the one where it like spits ice. It's like a Yeti. It spits ice onto its arms.
So cool.
The ice like sword kind of things or claws.
Yeah.
What's his name again?
His name's Gosharog. He's probably my favorite new monster.
That guy's dope.
He's so cool. He's great because traditionally beast wyverns have been like low tier pushover monsters. The basic one is this bear, and he's just a little small bear monster, and he stands on his hind legs and bumbles around and tries to swat you with his short arms. And pretty much every other beast wyvern is like that. They're just not really much of a challenge. But Gosharog is just big and he's bad, dude. And the tricks up his sleeve are insane. Like he has this deal where like he creates this giant ice sword, but then he can like break it off and throw it at you like a spinning like boomerang. Like
sick.
He's just he's so cool. He's a great fight, great new addition. Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
definitely hope to see him again in future games.
Yeah, exactly. That's going to be part of that wish list. I'm going to be like, all right, I'm going to start cherry picking people. And you told me too that one of the biggest differences between this and World is at the end game here. Well, there were, what'd you say, like 6 or 7 elders in World, elder dragons, but in this there are only
Yeah.
2. And this one
Mm.
doesn't have like the tempered monsters, which is basically just like the hardened, stronger versions of pretty much every monster you fought beforehand. This one does not have that as well. Were the 2 like elders at the end like really cool, or like was it
Oh.
kind of spoilers for people who don't want to know about the
Yeah.
elders, like, skip the
So
next
this
5
is
minutes?
yeah, I won't go into spoiler territory really, but this is my one like asterisk with the monster roster in this game is there's only 2 Elder Dragons. And for people who don't know, Elder Dragons are like the pinnacle challenge of these games. They're much more aggressive and dangerous. And oh yeah, shout out to your Nergigante t-shirt.
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
baby.
I'm wearing my Rathalos t-shirt. We both got these from Adam, who's the Bearhemoth on Twitter.
Yep, check them out on
Check out his
Redbubble.
Redbubble.
It's so good.
Shout out
Yes, thanks Wes
the
for the
Bearhemoth.
gift. It's amazing and I love it so much. People are like, what is this? I'm like, oh, it's Nergigante. He's my boy. I
Yeah.
love him so dearly.
But yeah, the Elder Dragons usually have unique mechanics that set them apart. Like Nergigante, for example, in World, has this system where he grows these spikes rapidly all over his body, and if you don't destroy them quick enough, they harden and then give him better armor that deflects your weapon attacks and makes you do less damage to him. And also, Elder Dragons are immune to traps. So normally, monsters in these games, you can set down either pitfall traps or shock traps that temporarily disable them so the team can pile on the damage, and you just cannot do that to Elder Dragons. So the 2 Elder Dragons that are in this game, they're brand new for this game,
Oh, cool.
and they're both what I would call like a gimmick fight. So
Oh,
one thing we haven't touched on in this game is the rampage system, but they're
yes.
basically like tower defense, wave based, extremely chaotic, optional missions. And the first of the 2 Elder Dragons you fight is the boss at the end of a rampage. So it doesn't feel like a real fight, and it's easy because in the rampage you have access to a bunch of installations like ballista and cannons and the Dragonator, and there's this new one that's a gigantic mortar that essentially launches a mini nuke like onto the monster. So you're
Incredible.
just totally tearing the crap out of this monster with these installations, and it's just not a real fight or a challenge. And the second Elder Dragon in the game is kind of like a reskin of the first one, and you don't fight it in a rampage mission, but it is still kind of a gimmick mission because you fight it in a special arena as a bunch of ballast, and there's a mini nuke launcher in it. So it's kind of the same fight. And on top of that, I don't really want to get too much into the weeds with it because most people probably aren't going to care, but suffice it to say, the rewards for bothering to defeat either the Elder Dragons really suck. They're like the worst armor sets in the entire game, and the weapons aren't that great either. So there's not even any reason to fight them more than once because it's just a waste of time.
So is it like a stats thing or like a look thing, an aesthetic thing that makes them bad, or is it both where you're like,
Well, from my personal perspective, I think that they're ugly. That's personal opinion though, and shouldn't really matter to anyone. But on top of them being ugly, in my opinion, each armor set for each of the 2 Elder Dragons has a huge array of skills on it that each only have 1 point in them. So for people who don't know, the way skills work in these games is you have to invest multiple points in the same skill, and it gets stronger the more points you have in it. And usually you want to build your set to have the maximum amount of points in it. And on top of that, the skills don't necessarily synergize from each of these sets. Like you'll have something like, I don't know, like guard up on it that makes your defense stronger when you're wielding a weapon with a shield like a lance or something, but then it'll have something like focus on it that like increases how fast meters charge on a weapon. So
sure.
you could like power up the sword mode on a switch axe faster, but the switch axe can't block, so the guard up skill is completely useless on it.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, all the pieces of the armor and the weapons for these dragons don't have any slots on them. So in these games, what you use slots for is slotting in what they call decorations that give you points and skills. So that's where your whole meta mix set thing comes in. You like try to get the most skill points on your armor as you can, and then you patch in the holes or put in brand new skills by slotting in decorations. And you just can't do that. So I can't understand it at all.
That's
Like
weird.
it doesn't make any sense. So, go figure. But another asterisk on this whole thing. I am making the in-game sound kind of negative, but for people who play World, they'll know Capcom's really, really great about supporting these games, and they usually release an update, a free update to the game once a month that has one or more new monsters in it.
Mm.
So obviously, they already have a roadmap planning new monsters. The first new monster they're planning to add to the game is another actual Elder Dragon that'll be like a normal fight,
Oh,
and yeah, eventually they'll come out with a big expansion like Iceborne with like, a higher tier of challenge and new monsters and stuff. So, in a year the end game will be there and I'm sure it'll be really great. But right now, as much as I love the game and I got my money's worth out of it for sure, I put a good 50 hours into it, had a really great time the whole time. But once I beat the final boss, the second Elder Dragon, I just stopped playing the game cold turkey. Like, like in World, I played the game for like, 500 hours.
yep.
So,
I
yeah.
hear you. Well, that was one of the concerns for me too, and a lot of this. It sounds like you played a lot of it solo, and you played a good chunk of it or some of it with a group, right?
Mm.
And how did you find the stability and stuff on Nintendo's end for you? Was it pretty good? Was it pretty stable?
Yeah, so just a little background. Nintendo's been using the same servers for like 8 or 9 years or something, like horrible like that. And
Perfect.
they actually just rolled out brand new multiplayer servers.
Oh, great.
And Monster Hunter Rise is the first game that's using them. And
Nice.
I've played like Smash Bros. Online. I don't have a wired connection because I didn't buy the stupid Ethernet dongle adapter. So it's just straight Wi-Fi over the airwaves on the Switch on Nintendo's old servers, and it is just,
This
yeah,
this
it is
thing.
not it is not a good experience playing Smash Brothers like that. But in the same conditions, playing Rise on whatever's going on with their new servers, really great. I did not have a single hiccup. I've played like 2 or 3 nights with a couple of my buddies over in the Discord. Hunter and Zach Pearson, shout out to their Twitch channel, Brothers Pearson. But yeah, and it's even more chaotic in this game because in past games when you play multiplayer, you don't get to use your palicos at all. So it's just, you've got some extra NPC little helpers while you're playing solo, but then in multiplayer, it's just you guys. Well, in Rise, each hunter can bring a buddy. So each hunter can have either a palico or a palamute.
Okay.
So you've got 4 hunters and 4 dogs and cats just going ham on this monster, and it's just like a flurry of animations and special effects, and it's almost impossible to even tell what's happening. And with all that going on, the game doesn't buckle. It just runs at a stable 30 frame rate. I did watch like a Digital Foundry on it, and like occasionally under stressful conditions it'll dip to like 29 or 28
Okay.
frames, but that's such a small difference you don't even notice it.
Yeah.
So I would honestly say like this game has like the most impressive performance on the Switch of any Switch game I've ever played. Like,
Cool.
the world and the art style and everything of Breath of the Wild just looks amazing, but that game's frame rate does buckle a lot. And whatever they're doing with the RE engine over at Capcom is just magic. It's extremely impressive how well this game runs, and how good the graphics are for the Switch, and how well it runs with how well the graphics look on the Switch. So, yeah, just don't really have any complaints about the multiplayer at all, to be honest.
That's great. It's so good to hear that because I know in the past, even with the demo, we had some issues. But in other multiplayer games that I've played on Switch and other Nintendo things, it's never been like, oh yeah, you play a Nintendo like online because it's super stable and really good. It's like I have had some Smash matches where I'm like, this doesn't. What's happening? Like I can't even move. So good to hear.
I didn't mention it because it's the same for every single Switch game, but there is the caveat that you can't. There's no in-game voice chat, so you gotta like have your phone open on Discord or whatever and
work around.
You know, so you gotta have like one earbud in and like turn your TV volume really low so that you don't get feedback, and that's really annoying. So I'm really hoping the Switch Pro or whatever, whenever that comes out, has built-in voice chat. It's just unacceptable.
It'll be through Microsoft because they've kind of been buddies lately. So Microsoft will be like, hey, we'll give you that. If you want some communication, we got you, Nintendo. That'd be hilarious.
I also should mention the way the multiplayer works linking up with people is not like it is in the demo because it's really crappy in the demo. It like requires you to like put in like a friend code thing and Password. It doesn't work half the time and we have to like reset. But in this game, there's a little NPC, and you just go talk to them, and there's a tab that says friends. You click on your friends. It shows who's online. You just click on which of your friends you want to link up with, and then it just puts you in their lobby. So it's really intuitive and easy and works well. So
there's like a hub. Is there any hub to like run around together, or is it just like you running into like the lobby with the friends type of thing?
So this is kind of a nice change from previous games. Normally, in the old games, there's specifically an area that's called the Hunter's Hub. It's a smaller area within the larger base that you run around in solo that has like your player housing and your merchants and your blacksmith and all that. So normally in the past games, you just have the small hub, and while you're in multiplayer, you can leave the hub, but each character's village is like their own separate instance, so you can only see each other when you're in the hub. But in Rise, everybody's in the same instance of the entire village, so you can all leave the hub together and zip around in the village on your wirebugs and see each other jumping around and stuff.
Cool.
So that is actually pretty cool.
That's really nice. Oh my gosh, yeah, because you're right. It feels so weird that like the gathering hub in World is like that's the only place I can hang out with you. I just run around my entire huge base alone, and it's like, I'm there too, but I'm invisible to you, or it doesn't matter. I'm like, it's kind of like, should we go meet in my room? Because you guys can meet me there. Like, it's just kind of strange. So that's cool.
One thing also about the multiplayer that's a funny change from Rise, I guess it also has its pros and cons, but when you fight a monster for the first time, there is a cutscene like in World. The way it worked in World was you had to find the monster in the map first after you started the mission, and then you saw a cutscene, and then once the cutscene was over, then your friends could join your mission. It's really bad and annoying.
Yep.
Well, this game, they just show a cutscene at the start of the mission before you actually load into the map and just get it out of the way, and then everybody can start the mission at the same time.
Okay, cool. So they're like, oh, you came across this monster, and you're like, yeah, I mean, I would have, but it's out there.
Yeah.
So okay, cool. Oh, I also forgot to ask this, but the story, I don't know, like I thought World Story was fine. I don't, you don't really play games typically for the story. Is this story something that you're like, man, you could dig into this, or is it like,
This has got to be the worst story in a Monster Hunter game ever. It's so bad. I think what's making it worse, traditionally Monster Hunter does not have a great story, and the older games are more just lighthearted and whimsical, and the writing's more there to be funny and entertaining than actually have a deep story. And in the old games, there's no voice acting, so you're just reading it in text boxes, and the characters saying dumb, funny, punny things. Well, in World, they tried to go, more serious with the story and actual cutscenes and full voice acting for all the characters and everything. And like you said, it was fine. It was serviceable. It wasn't great. It wasn't bad. It was just, it served its purpose. Well, in this game, it's like the quality of the story like slipped backwards to how it was in the old games when it was text-based, but it still has cutscenes and voice acting, and it somehow just makes it way worse than even the old text-based ones. And you just have such small exposure to the characters in the story, and it moves so fast, and they try to make you feel like you care about these characters, and it's just not working. And I feel really bad about Magnum Malo. the flagship monster, because he's actually a really cool monster. Has great weapons, has great weapon designs. His armor set looks really cool. But the way the story goes is like, oh, it's the Rampage. Look, Magnum Malo is leading the monsters, and then it's like, just do a bunch of other quests, and then it's like, we've drawn Magnum Malo outside of the village. It's time to stop him, and then you just go kill him, and then like credits roll, and then that's it. You know, it's just like, so yeah, don't.
Beautiful.
It's hard to like hold it against the game because you're really not here for the story at all. It's just a bonus, and the gameplay is extremely compelling and makes the game what it is, and it's what you're there for. So it's easy to just completely dismiss the story and not even think about it. But if you are playing this game for, I don't know why, but expecting a story or playing it for the story, you will be disappointed. So just know that.
That's good to know. And technically, speaking of Magnum Malo, he's like a beast, like wyvern, right? He's not, or a fanged wyvern. He's not like a elder dragon or anything like that, right?
Yeah, that did catch me off guard because Nergigante, the flagship monster for the last game, was an elder dragon, and he's just so much more imposing because he has those special mechanics and you can't capture him and everything. But I did realize, reflecting on the older games, that Nergigante is actually the only flagship monster that is an elder dragon. So it is actually more normal for the flagship monster to be just a normal monster. But it did give him less impact than Nergigante because he just was not as much of a challenge because you could abuse traps and stuff to make the fight a lot more easy. So he's a great monster. I don't really have anything bad to say about him, but he's not Nergigante. So.
Sure. Well, and the weird thing about Nergigante is like he's like the poster child, but then like Rathalos was kind of the poster child, like even for like the Xbox load screen thing, where they show Rathalos fighting Anjanath.
Yeah.
And it was like kind of like Nergigante is kind of in the back, but like I think it was just trying to be like, hey, Monster Hunter World's a big deal, and here's one of the monsters that some of our old fans would know. A lot of people would be like, hey, it's a red dragon. Right. That looks kind of cool. They'll be like, what's that sort of thing? So it's like they had like a few of them, even though I would still agree with you. Nergigante, I mean, is the heart and soul. I mean, the boy's going to bleed you with his spikes, baby.
And, Nergigante had weight because they really built him up in the story.
Oh,
because you're just finding out about him as a mystery. He's this unknown monster, and you start finding signs of him in the environment on other hunts over a long period of time in the game. Like these crazy spikes are just like in the environment. You find dead monsters with spikes in them, and you're like, what? And then you fight the first like big Elder Dragon siege fight with Zora Magdaros, and during the fight Nergigante appears and he's trying to kill Zora Magdaros, and you can't even kill him, you just repel him and he flies away, and then finally you like track him down and fight him one-on-one, and it's just completely epic. So he's just handled so much better than Magnum Malo. Like, part of the reason Magnum Malo falls flat is just the story is not supporting his importance, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, and the thing is too with him, like Nergigante was kind of like he's a villain, but then he's like an anti-hero, and like even when you think you've killed him, he's not really dead. And I just love, like, if you like him at all in the cutscenes, you'll be like, oh, later on, especially in Iceborne, you're like, oh my god, you're like, this guy's insanity. His presence is felt throughout because even the name of his song is like, even the elder dragons like tremble in fear, and it's like, oh, because he's like going around.
He's an elder dragon killer, dude.
Yeah, he's like,
he's
so great.
He's there can be only one Highlander elder dragon, dude.
I want to see him fight like Devil Joe, because Devil Joe's always like, he's like the destroyer of worlds. He eats everything, and I was like, yeah, but Nergigante probably rip him apart, right? You just feel like, so
reflecting on that. Now that you brought up Nergigante, I'm just thinking about his fight. He has this signature move, if you will, where he leaps into the air and just rockets like straight diving towards you, and there's even a crazy like whistling wind sound. And normally, depending on how you've built up your armor set, normally that kills most players in one hit, especially the first time they're fighting him because they're not expecting it. Well, Magnum Malo basically has the same attack, but the thing is, since wire bugs are in the game, you just see it and then you're like, oh, and then you just zip away and then he completely misses. Or what happened to me was I was on my Palamute, right? I was running a circle around Magnum Malo because I was sharpening my weapon on the back of my dog. And then my camera, I wasn't paying too much attention to Magnamalo because I knew I didn't need to. So my camera's not even facing Magnamalo, and I'm just running around him in a circle. And all of a sudden, I just see Magnamalo zoom through the air in this one-hit KO dive, and he just goes right over the top of me because the Palamute's just moving so fast, and it's just like, oh, okay. It's like that's how kind of broken the Palamutes are. Is I just accidentally completely negated the super one-hit kill move of Magnamalo without paying attention because it just moves so fast, the dog, and that's kind of like at the crux of my problem with the Palamutes
Sure.
because you just don't have that when you fight Gigante. So you're probably going to die the first time. Then you're aware of the move, and then you got to figure out, okay, well, how do I deal with this move? And it depends on the weapon you have, and it's a really tight window, so there's still a chance of failure if you don't execute the proper countermeasures fast enough, and that's just not really in any fight in Rise because of the wire bug and the dog. So
Yeah.
what? Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Oh no, I was gonna say that's kind of crazy they bring that up. It's like the Palamute's so fast it could outrun like an ecliptic meteor or something from like the
Right. That's what we need now. We need like more damage check-ins to kill moves.
Oh my gosh! Please, Capcom, please. He's joking. We don't need that. We gotta. It's so horrible. It's like the team's doing okay. It's like 3 of us just died. It's over. It's like, oh, good.
I will say that despite my gripes with the new mechanics, the gripes I have too are from the perspective of high level play and in game, and for most players that's not going to matter. And the trade-off for these new mechanics is just lowering the barrier to entry for new players. And at the end of the day, I do think that's the most important thing. So if the dogs and the wire bugs get more people to play the game because it's making the game easier to enter, then that's a net positive in my book. We just want more people coming into the Monster Hunter fold.
Yeah, and it's also nice for the people on Switch who probably saw this, and it being a PlayStation typically kind of, I don't know, series a little bit more so in the past, but then kind of moving between, and then finally, getting this on the Switch to kind of bolster the library of Switch games and being specific to Switch, at least for now. And then it's coming to PC, which a lot of people, especially like Xbox people, are like, you're a hair away from being on Xbox if you're on PC. It's like, come on, Phil. But I could see why that's just not going to happen. That's okay. That's all right. But maybe the sequel to World would be something that could be on both. The problem is you'd have to make.
I think it will be.
Yeah. I just don't know if compromises, on a tech level is going to be the problem. Where it's like you want to push it, and like maybe Switch or Switch Pro wouldn't be able to even compete with like a Series S or a PlayStation 5 or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah, I'm hoping the Switch Pro alleviates that. Like, obviously, whatever the Switch Pro version of the next mainline Monster Hunter game would not be as graphically impressive as any of the other platforms, but I still think it would just be possible to be played on.
Yeah.
So, hopefully it would be on all platforms. And I don't actually know what the deal is with Rise, if they just have bought console exclusivity or if it's just timed exclusivity. So It could be, not that they've made any plans announced of it, but it would be really interesting if once it hits PC, it also eventually comes to PlayStation and Xbox.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Well, and also I don't want to discount Nintendo because I don't know anything about the Switch Pro, but knowing them, it could be a system that's stronger than any of the new stuff, and it's actually not portable, and it's just like this gigantic piece of hardware that you just put in a corner of your room, and it's just like this. Nintendo's like, you said you wanted the most powerful system? Well, we just built it, and it's $3,000, and everybo's gonna buy it. And people will be like, I got to.
Probably would.
Yeah, you'd be like,
I remortgaged my home.
I needed to play it. Do you know what Mario looks? He looks like a real person now. Like, he looks so realistic. It's so cool. Breath of the Wild 2 is 700 hours long. Crit path. You're like, oh my gosh. So what else? Monster Hunter Rise. I think you kind of talked about most all of it. Is there anything else you want to like say about it, good or bad, or any mechanic that we maybe left out that you want to be like, oh yeah, we didn't talk about this. This is the time.
One thing that's confused me is the layered armor system. I think none of the like mainline games in the past before World, unless it was like super in-game stuff that I never got to, had layered armor settings. But I think some of the online games might have had, like the Frontier games. So World was kind of like the first like mainline game where they finally got in layered armor, and it was just kind of irritating because they kept like they rolled it out after launch, but then it was only some armors you could get, and then they kept patching in more armors, and I just didn't understand like why it was taking them so long, because all those armors are just already in the game, and it just feels like you should just be flipping a switch to just change what your armor looks like.
Yeah.
And I kind of felt like since they were pioneering that system in World, then it would just be built into the game from the start in Rise. But there's no layered armor right now in Rise except for DLC pre-order bonus layered armor. So that's irritating too, because that means layered armor's in the game and they just haven't built in the. So you've got the classic dilemma of fashion or function, and players like me are going for the meta builds with all the best skills to increase your DPS, and man, my character just looks like a clown, and I'm tired of it, and I just can't wait for layered armor. So please, Capcom, give us layered armor, hurry.
Yes, layered armor, or just go full on transmog, baby. Let's go. World 2. Let's just make it so I can make it look like anything. Yeah, for people who don't know, so it's like, I think most people watching or to this point should know by now, but layered armor is basically just like, it would change all of Kaedhen's like armor to look like one set from like various set like of armor. So it's like, it has a uniform look, because like you're right, if you do put on like, I'm putting on 2 pieces of this and 1 piece of this and 2 other pieces of this, I'm like, you look like some sort of like monster hunting sadist that's just like, I got just pieces of skin stapled to my body. Like, here we go. So
no. I did think of one last thing to say. I just want to shout out Monster Hunter World and say that Rise by no means replaces World. Like, the games coexist and offer different enough experiences that are worth playing both. So if you're getting into the series for the first time by playing Rise and you beat it and you're hungering for more, definitely check out World. It's just as good, if not better, of an experience. Play Monster.
And if you want, if you want to have like even more, like, because you said it was kind of like 55 hours, depending on when the expansion comes and down the line, maybe Rise will be, an even lengthier game. But right now, I think for a while they were kind of bundling, or just you had to buy it with Iceborne, which right now I think the base game is on Game Pass. So if you have an Xbox and you just want to try it out, and you have Game Pass, you can start there. But like, it's $60. I think it was like $60. It might be, it's gone down in price, like the bundle with World and Iceborne. It might be cheaper.
Yeah,
but
a master edition or whatever.
The ridiculous thing is, and I don't like, if you're into Monster Hunter at all, and I wasn't, but I did get into it. There is not, I don't think, a game for me that I've gotten more bang for my buck than Monster Hunter World. Like, it's I've said this, maybe it's almost blasphemy to some people, it might be my favorite game of all time. It is. I just sometimes sit back and I'm like, for me too. I'm like, it's just so freaking good. So when this came out, I was like, I wanted to check into it, and a lot of it was like, I wanted to play with friends, but kind of juggling multiple like online subscriptions, and I was like, I already put 600 hours into World, and I don't know if I want to like throw away my life for another game. I might have to wait a while till they make a sequel, but it sounds like Rise is still worthy, and again, like we talked about at the beginning, kind of like a parallel, or kind of working in tandem with World, so that way if you play one, that doesn't mean like just skip it. You can go try the other one if you have the opportunity to do so, and the time and the money, but mostly the time. Right, because they demand a little bit to get into, even though I think they're fun from the get-go, but there's something about it later on. And as we did like one stream, as you kind of suggested, Kaedhen, I went back and decided to help out some super low rank hunters, call it the flex stream, and just roll in there with my fully kitted out guide. I'm just like, I'm gonna help you kill these monsters in about 20 seconds. Like, I'm not even joking. Like, we were killing stuff so fast, and I dance away, I kabuki away. I'm like, kabuki.
Yeah, for sure. I love that both World and Rise have incentives for higher level players to help low rank players. In World, you just get like items that you can sell for a ton of money, And then in Rise, you get these things called friend points that fill up a meter, and when it fills up, you just get like a bunch of like a useful item like life
Oh,
powders or something
cool.
like that. So yeah,
Yes, I love every game should have that. Every loot game should have that because I've played one recently where it was like there's no incentive to help your friends and it's actually really painful to do so, and you're like,
yeah.
like this isn't fun for me. So yeah, it should be like that because if you sell that, because you need so much zenny or the money in the game to like upgrade stuff in
Mm,
the world, and those gold eggs can really be helpful if you help out a few people. You're like, oh, there we go.
definitely.
So yeah, Monster Hunter Rise, a recommendation from you with some asterisks. Also, you being a Monster Hunter veteran, and that's why I wanted you to come on the show because it's like, well, he knows it. He's played through this. You have that perspective, which is kind of unique, especially for me because I wouldn't, even if I played through all of Rise, I might not still be able to kind of parse out the differences like you have here. So I appreciate that. Thank you, man.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, dude.
Oh, it's so good. Just needs more Nergigante, but I get why he's not in there because
Yeah.
it's like they make him parallel.
Free title update. Free title update.
Free title update, dude. And as we talked about, which is weird, like the wire bug and the clutch claw were made like kind of around the same time, but the teams apparently weren't talking to each other. I was like, that's so crazy that they're both like, I think grapple hooks, and it's like I think maybe a grapple hook that goes in the sky, and they're like, well, how do we? It's
Oh,
like
dang it.
it's a
It's
bug.
better than our grapple hook.
You're like, oh man. You're like,
Oh,
well,
shout out to the slinger, dude. Like, it's
ah.
painful to not have the slinger in Rise. Like,
Oh, yeah, that's
needs
got to
to
be
be there.
weird. Oh, yeah, 'cause
Yeah.
that's for sure something, and I've used it to great effect sometimes.
Yeah.
Man, I love the slinger. Just setting off those bombs when they go to sleep and stuff. So good. Anyway, that's gonna do for our Monster Hunter Rise talk. Now it's time to move into the next segment of the show. The segment I like to call, Kaedhen likes to call, we all like to call, Time Killers. Ooh, that was a rumbly one, wasn't it? Ooh, my goodness. It's the games we've been playing, the movies and the shows we've been viewing / watching besides Monster Hunter Rise. What you been killing time with, buddy?
Dude, I've been on this Godzilla kick, right?
Yes!
So, see,
Yes!
Godzilla versus Kong is coming out. This is about a couple months ago, and I'm like, you know what? I never took the time to watch the MonsterVerse. My wife just bought HBO so we could watch some random show. Why don't I just dive into the MonsterVerse? So I binge Godzilla, Skull Island, King of the Monsters, and then I'm twiddling my thumbs waiting for Godzilla vs. Kong to go out. So I decided to go watch Shin Godzilla, which was amazing. So just this has just really coincided with the whole Monster Hunter Rise hype too, because like I think the only other game I get as excited for is a new Zelda game. So I was just through the roof on hype with Monster Hunter Rise and watching all these movies about giant monsters fighting each other. And then Monster Hunter Rise comes out a week before Godzilla vs. Kong. So just riding this wave of giant monster fights, dude. And so I did recently watch Godzilla vs. Kong, is what I was trying to say.
Okay, so first off, this hype wave, it sounds like it kind of crested, but you still like Rise kind of met it along with these other things.
Yeah,
I got
coming down off the wave now.
Coming down off the wave. Shin Godzilla, did you have to watch that somewhere else? Like you had to rent it somewhere?
Yeah, I just like rented it off the PlayStation Store.
Okay, yeah, because
so.
I think you told me I should check that one out because I was talking to someone
You
about that
should, yeah.
recently, and I was like, I don't know if I'd want to watch a movie like from like a bunch of different perspectives that wasn't like Godzilla or like a main cast, but I was like, that's what like the world would respond to if Godzilla was around and it's jumping around a ton.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that does sound interesting, and I've heard it's really good. But anyway, so that one's really good, or you say that's pretty good. The MonsterVerse. Dude, tell me about it. Like, how do you feel about it now? Jumping, you get to watch them back to back to back. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's been a great experience. I was in the right mindset going in. You know, I'm not trying to be some like crazy like hypercritical monster. It's just like I just want to watch giant monsters fight each other. So, you know, obviously, like I still like the Godzilla. What was that, like 2016 or something?
2014. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I agree with the criticisms that there's just not enough monster fighting in it. So that was, you know, it's a low bar that we can have, like, you know, go up from here. And I did enjoy Kong Skull Island and Godzilla King of the Monsters a lot more. I did feel, although it's still basically subpar. The human drama element of King of the Monsters was better than the first movie. Like their mistake in the first movie was killing Bryan Cranston like a third of the way. To, like, what were you thinking?
I
Like,
don't know. I don't know if it was like a scheduling
thinking?
thing, because like the most dramatic thing out of any human stuff from the MonsterVerse was like him and his wife in the beginning of that movie, and you're like, you feel it. You're like, this is great. There's human drama in here. I really care. And then it's like he's dead, and it's not even Godzilla who did it. You're like, well, okay. Like,
But yeah, so I definitely enjoyed the second movie more. It's just great to see Godzilla fighting a variety of monsters, tag teaming with Mothra. Yeah, just the King Ghidorah fight, dude, or he just like headlocks Ghidorah and just rips his head off, dude. Like, oh man. And then so yeah, then that's when I made a pit stop for Godzilla, but it's not part of this MonsterVerse. So anyway, just going to oh well, I guess just to mention Skull Island. That's just a really fun movie. You know, like Peter Jackson's King Kong is probably the greatest King Kong movie ever made and will never be surpassed. But the tone of Skull Island was just really playful and like, what's the actor? He plays like the character who was like stuck on the island, like the crashed
John C.
pilot.
Reilly. He's the best, dude.
I loved his character in that
He's
movie. He's
the
just
best
so
one in
funny.
that whole thing.
And just like, just so an example of the tone, right? You've got this dramatic scene where a dude's sacrificing himself to save the party by arming himself with a live grenade vest, and he's approaching the giant monster, you know, just like, eat me. And then the monster just whips him with his tail like 200 feet through the air into a mountain, and he just explodes on the side of the mountain. Useless death, like completely hilarious.
Yep.
Yeah, so that movie was just a good time, and digging deeper into this lore with Monarch, the secret organization that tracks the Titans, and hinting more at the Hollow Earth. Well, I guess in Godzilla King of the Monsters, we get a little glimpse. I guess it wasn't technically the Hollow Earth, but they go into this like underground, underwater, under ocean cavern with
the
like
temple.
Yeah, that was really interesting. It's like, let's see more about this civilization that worships Godzilla, please.
Yes!
Like, what's going on here? Let's make a movie like 2,000 years ago with these guys.
Yes!
Like, but yeah. So you know, the movies are getting better as they're going. I don't have any time to cool off from them because I'm watching them back to back. Going into King of the Monsters with max hype, and yeah, that movie just brought it with the monster fights, dude. Like the human drama is fine. There are too many characters. Like the scientist guy was weird, whatever. But like the monster fights were just like the fatality on Kong versus Mecha Godzilla with the axe, dude. Just like like yeah, just yeah. It finally gave the people what they wanted, and I think if they can just push that bar even farther in that direction and just completely eliminate the human drama and just let us have 2 hours of Godzilla just fighting a bunch of different monsters. Like,
that's all I want, man. That would be
Yes.
beautiful. I was like, I almost jumped out of my seat in the theater for King of the Monsters when they resurrect Godzilla and they're playing like the score, which is like Bear McCreary, who did God of War. He like redid like the old stuff, and they didn't use it for like Godzilla vs Kong, which saddens me. But he comes up and he does his like laser in the air, and I was like, he's gonna kill everybody. And then the final shot of that movie is like all of them bowing down to him, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, this is so good. And then going into like Godzilla vs Kong, it's like for you see this and you're like, you're watching these back to back to back, and you're like, all right, there's like, you can quickly see, you're like, oh, they're starting to get it. They're starting to lean more into like I'm going to take this monster and bash its face into a skyscraper. And you're like, bravo, you're starting to get it. And it sounds like, are you more of a Kong guy versus Godzilla, or are you a Godzilla guy, or does it not matter?
I'm a Godzilla guy, dude.
Okay.
He's the king of the monsters. It's in his name.
Right, baby? I love that. But like in the Kong stuff for him, they gave him moments to still be cool. Like it wasn't like fully one-sided, which I think was smart, because there's a lot of people who love Kong. But yeah, I'm totally with you. I was like, he was, man, especially at the end where they kind of declare a victor. If this was rated R, not only would Godzilla be bleeding from that axe wound, but Kong would be like ripped apart. Like his chest would be bleeding everywhere because he like pins him down. He's just like, I'm gonna rip you apart.
Dude, that one like flurry rush Godzilla does where he just rushes into Kong and he's just like just cutting into his chest, and you see all the cuts. I think that was like one of the greatest parts about the animation of this movie, because in a lot of the other movies, you don't actually see like a lot of like battle damage on the monsters. They're just kind of knocking each other around. But in this movie, it gets visceral, dude.
Oh my
So,
gosh, yeah, dude. And I just, I was watching a video about it where they're saying like, well, he should have definitely like, it's like Batman versus Superman. He should have just like murdered King Kong right there. But
isn't it so funny that like Kong is like clearly like the Batman with no superpowers, and like Godzilla's like he can shoot a literal like atomic laser beam that can burrow through the entire Earth. Like,
yeah,
what are you doing, King Kong?
which I love that like Kong knows it and he just has to kind of run away sometimes. And like the director of this movie, we were talking about this last week, but he was like, I always love the atomic breath, and he's like, I really pushed to use it a lot. And it's like when you watch this movie in particular versus like 2014 where he uses it like once or twice, here he's using it like it's going out of style. He's like
Yeah,
I'm just
dude.
I'm gonna vaporize
Yeah, it's like, why wouldn't he?
everybody. Yeah, and I just love that whole, I don't know if you saw that that tweet, someone did like an anime drawing of somebody with Godzilla, and there was like a just like a little person. The little person says to Godzilla, it's like, hey Godzilla, there's no way you could possibly like bore to the center of the earth with that. And Godzilla looks at him and goes like, and just like that anime like resolve, like I won't be stopped by anyone, I will do this. But yeah, I like that movie, and I like that they kind of declared Victor a winner, and it was kind of like a, I'm not even gonna kill you because you're gonna die. Like he's just kind of like, yeah, you're dead, and you're not even worth the atomic breath. So later, buddy. Like I'm gonna go
Yeah,
back
dude.
to wrecking Hong
Putting him in
Kong.
his place.
Oh, so good. But yeah, I hope to see more of that stuff in the future, because like you said, it could go. They can just go nuts
Yeah.
with it. Just go like really crazy.
Man, and
crazy.
shout out to the like Hollow Earth sequence. Like they just really
Yeah.
nailed that. Like was really apprehensive about that going in, that they're setting that up in the lore, that they would somehow just like not stick the landing on that
Mhm.
some way. But it was just a really, really, really cool sequence, and like setting up like compelling lore about this ancient Kong civilization, and why do they use Godzilla's scales as like axes,
I
and
wanna
like what's the
know.
dynamic like.
Wanna know?
Yeah, so yeah, if we could just get more of Hollow Earth, leave the human trauma on Earth behind, more monsters. So yeah, it was a great experience, and they still have room to grow. So yeah, bring on the next one.
Yeah, just I was saying this last week. Just do me a favor, if we do jump back to the past, I don't want to see like 20 Godzillas versus 20 Kongs. Like I just
Yeah.
like that'll be kind of weird. Like it's just like 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 the world
Yeah, for
wouldn't
sure.
recover from a fight like that. But yeah, I want to know where that axe came from and all that stuff. I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, so many questions. And also a shorter movie. I don't know if you could appreciate that,
Yeah.
but it was like less than 2 hours. It's just moving. It's like, here we go. Here we go.
Mhm.
Yeah, was that your favorite fight though? Was that the Hong Kong fight, or was it the aircraft carrier one? Or
The aircraft carrier was a little weird,
Yeah.
because you could just it was like a little too painfully obvious that like they were holding back because they couldn't kill each other yet, because they still had the rest of the movie to go through. And there's just like a weird like there's a weird like scale thing that happens in the aircraft carrier part. Like I don't actually know how big aircraft carriers are, but they seem like they're smaller than like a 100-story skyscraper. Yet, Kong and Godzilla are both standing on one, and it just seems like how big Godzilla is on like the scenes where like the little girl's going out in the rain to like talk to him with sign language is like about as big as like Godzilla's like shin is in
Yeah.
the first Godzilla movie. So it's just like everybody's like changing sizes. So
Mhm.
yeah, definitely the Hong Kong fight. Just great cinematography with like the lighting with the blue and pink motif, and just like the environmental takedowns of just like slamming dudes. And like I think doesn't Kong at one point just like headlock like Godzilla and just push his head like into a skyscraper? Somebody should do like a joke like kill count movie where like every time they hit a skyscraper the kill count goes up by like 2,000 people.
Oh yeah, totally. One of my favorites is later on. There's like this shot from inside a building where Mechagodzilla's taking Godzilla's face and smashing it into one building, another building, and then the third building's the one where the camera is. And you're like,
Yeah.
you're like, oh my gosh, there'd be so many people who would just be like, yeah, they're all dead. Like they do like one or two shots from the ground. You're like, oh yeah, they're all dead. Like it's just like, I don't know what to tell you. You
Yeah.
can't get away from that fight. They don't care. The kaiju don't care.
One thing I did like about the aircraft carrier fight, though, was just showing Godzilla's, I guess, his like capabilities in the water, it like becomes clear that like the water is his turf. Like
Oh
he
yeah.
is like a reptile. Like he's got the serpentine movements and the wrap you with his tail and swims faster and doesn't have that fur like Kong to weigh him down with water weight. So that was pretty interesting. It'd be really cool to see in future movies Kong taking on some kind of like aquatic monsters or something like that for
Yeah,
sure.
totally. Because he fights like that one squid kind of quickly or briefly in Kong Skull Island. It's just like his food, but you kind of like, oh, he's in trouble, and you're like, oh no, he's fine. Like he just kind of rips it apart,
Yeah,
and you're
that
like,
was a cool scene for sure.
yeah. Or when he kind of uses the chains and stuff to like the anchor. I was like, oh, I thought he was gonna do more of that. He kind of does it with the axe. I was like, oh, he's gonna be really tricky. Like he's gonna be
Yeah.
like, I'm gonna grab this chain and whip you with it. But he didn't do as much, which is okay. But anyway, so you watched all those. That's great, man. And did
Yeah.
you kind of enjoy them more as time went on? It sounds like.
Yeah, I do think each subsequent movie is better than the last. And one thing I always like about giant monster fight movies is to enjoy them, you just have to suspend your disbelief and enter the magic circle. You know, like if you do not do that, you cannot enjoy them. And just being invited to enter that headspace to just suspend your disbelief and just be willing to just accept giant monsters duking it out is just it's really great, almost like strange brain relaxation experience. So and it just gets better as the movies go along because there's more monster fights, so you have to suspend your disbelief for longer. So,
Yep. I know Joe probably isn't watching this, but that is exactly what he did not do last week. He's very
oh
technical
no.
based, and I was like, this is why I didn't want to watch it with you because I don't want you to be like, I can't believe Godzilla drilled to the center of the
Yeah.
earth with his atomic breath. I'm like, dude, don't don't even worry. Like it's not to the center. Don't
You
just
can't believe
it's
that right there is your problem.
Exactly. You gotta believe Godzilla is just so. I get like there'd be people, and maybe in the next movie they'll have like a group that starts to worship him again, because in this day and age there would be a group who'd be like, yeah, I prescribe to the religion of Godzilla. You'd be like, look, he's right there.
You know, what's kind of interesting is I think from that perspective, Joe might actually like Shin Godzilla because they go to great pains in that movie to kind of try and provide an explanation for what's happening and why Godzilla has the capabilities that he has.
Okay, cool.
So digging into that stuff might be kind of more up Joe's alley.
Okay, I do want to check that one out because that's a little bit more in the flavor of the old school Toho. It is like
Yeah.
Toho because
It is Toho, yeah.
Yeah, it's like old fashioned.
It was their answer to the Hollywood reboot. They're like, we got to bring Godzilla back into Japan. So
Which is so crazy. And like as we talked about last week, Godzilla starting off in 1954 as being kind of an allegory for nuclear war.
Yeah.
And the fear of that. And now he's become like one of their national mascots, and like people just love Godzilla. They're just like, this is incredible. And it's funny because like it also plays in other places like China where it did really well, and it's like, yep, he destroyed Hong Kong, and people are like, Godzilla's amazing.
Yeah.
Like he's great, we love him. I would love to hear what Toho thinks about Godzilla versus Kong. I would just love it just where it's just like a gif of them and looking at a piece of paper and then just like acceptable. Like it's like, oh, he won.
Right.
He basically, oh, that's good. We love him. What did you do to Mechagodzilla? He looks different, but it's fine. Dude, that's so cool. I'm so glad you got to watch those. I just love like seeing this stuff. It brings a tear to my eye because I used to watch the old ones. I don't know if you ever did when you were younger, but
I didn't. Yeah, so that's an interesting perspective you have.
yeah, it's just like to see like dudes in suits versus what it is now being taken so seriously, and it's just like this.
All I've seen really is that meme. It's a GIF. If you probably just search Godzilla King Kong, it comes up of like the two dudes in the Godzilla King Kong suits. And he's got a tree, and he's just trying to shove it in Godzilla's throat. It's like, what?
Yeah, that people are saying they think it's an homage in this more recent one where he takes the axe like handle and tries to stick in his throat. I was like, I guess kind of. But yeah, dude, Godzilla versus Kong back in the day. Oh boy, what a different fight! All I gotta say is Kong had lightning hands because he got struck by lightning because he died and then was resurrected by a lightning bolt, and then he starts like slapping
Monkey King
Godzilla.
style, dude. Journey to the West.
It's wild, dude. Like if you ever have a chance, go check it out. And they had like, it was one of the first times too. They had like, I think like Americans be part of it too, and they did it. It was like, oh, it's like a fight that's gonna happen, and the entire world's watching, and they like compared Kong's brain to Godzilla's brain, and it's this whole thing. it's wild. But anyway, those are on HBO Max as well. I don't know if you said you have HBO, or I don't know if it's HBO Max. Probably if you got to watch
Yeah, yeah.
Godzilla's Kong. Those old ones are on there. I would recommend, if you have a chance, to check them out, but maybe skip. There's just a lot of like weird spy human drama with like aliens and stuff. Yeah, just cut right to the fights, because some of them are great.
Yeah.
Godzilla has a lot of personality. One of my favorite ones, as I was saying this last week, he misses a shot on like Mechagodzilla, and he just goes like, dang it. Like, he snaps.
Seriously?
Yeah, he's like, shucks. He's like, shoot, I tried my best. Like, there's a lot of just like, I'm Godzilla.
Yeah.
Like, it's very good. Very, very, very corny. But anyway, besides that, anything else you've been killing time with?
Just a quick shout out to D&D. That is Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
It's got dragons in it, which are kind of like giant monsters, so it's kind of adjacent. But
sure. It all plays in.
I have 2 groups that I'm the dungeon master for that I play with once a week each, and that's been going on maybe about a good 6 months now. I started.
Wow.
It's weird, like the pandemic has been such a horrible thing to happen globally, but you got to take those silver linings where you can. I met you because of the pandemic, because I just started watching Twitch streams because I was laid off of work and I didn't have anything to do. And then, meeting you gave us the itch to start our own podcast. And so I met so many people through that circumstance. And then also because of the pandemic, there's just not a lot of opportunity to be able to do things in person with people. So weirdly, in a way, that had me reconnect with some of my friends that are remote from me, that just live in different cities, who I hadn't connected with as much since like high school or since college, just because we didn't live in the same area, couldn't do stuff together. But now it's like the only way anybody can spend any time with each other is online. So might as well, hang out, reconnect with those old friends, because it's same distance for everybody. But so yeah, I've got one group that's a couple of my old friends from high school, and then one group's 2 of my brothers, and cool. It's just been great. Obviously the experience just gets better the more you play, because you grow as it really is kind of like a performance in a way, and there's a lot of improvisation involved. So you're just learning to be a better performer and provide a better experience for your players. And I don't know if I can. My desk over here is just completely covered in Dungeons and Dragons books.
Amazing! That's so cool.
Cross-referencing and everything, but yeah, it's just also being plugged into that community now. Like, I'm listening to like podcasts on D&D news and paying attention now, and new books are coming out and getting excited about that. And it's just a great experience. And if anyone has ever listening to this been thinking about ever playing D&D and you haven't taken the plunge, take the plunge. It's just great times. Shout out to D&D and the fun it's giving folks in these trying times.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Playing over the internet. Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Oh my gosh. Well, one of these days we'll do a one-off or something, man. Like, I feel like we're gonna be at a party or something. Like, it'll be like, let's do it together. I totally agree with you about the performance thing, because I used to play a while ago in person with a group, and that was one gripe I often had, is I was like, I just wanted everyone to like fully perform and not just be like yourself, which is hard to do. And not everybody wants to play D&D and be like, hey, I am an actor. Like, not everyone wants to do that.
Right.
But for the ones who do, like myself, I'm like, let's all do it. Let's all commit to this. And then also divorcing yourself of like, yeah, maybe I told you in the game that like you're a piece of garbage and I'm gonna try to kill you. I don't think that in real life. Like, you just gotta like separate.
Yeah,
it's so hard to do.
Gives you that opportunity more so than any. It's kind of weird because I've been playing D&D so much recently. Like, I've kind of been like feeling that like I just enjoy playing D&D like more than any video game, and that's very subjective because it really depends on the group of people you're playing with.
For sure.
But just having that opportunity more so than any like role-playing video game to just really like step into another character's shoes and try and act out what it's like to play someone who's not you. It's just a really cool experience. Not to scare anyone away with the whole performance aspect, because in my group, one of my players is definitely less. He has less experience than like my other player. He like literally played D&D every day for like a year with his college roommates. So he's literally got like over 1,000 hours of D&D. He's a
Amazing.
very seasoned, experienced role player. And my other player's just starting out. He's got social anxiety. And like the difference between them is, my one player with the experience, he literally embodies his character and acts out like every word his character says. And my other character, he's just like, he just out of character tells us what his character wants to do, or a general idea of what his character wants to say. And so there's definitely different entry levels, and not everybody has to be on the same level. So definitely don't let that scare you away. And it's definitely a great utility for, developing social skills if
Oh
you're
yeah.
someone who has that kind of anxiety or whatever. So
Oh, totally.
D&D.
Yeah, infinite possibilities too. Maybe that's one of the reasons why you kind of prefer it over games sometimes. 'Cause sometimes when you go
Yeah.
back to a game after playing D&D, you're like, it's like binary options, or like
Yeah.
you're like good or evil, or like you can't. You're like,
Right.
I don't really like this quest giver. Can I kill him? It's like no.
Yeah. And yeah.
Oh, sure, sure.
Shout out to. Oh, I think I'm having connection issues.
Oh no, you're good.
Oh, all right. I think I just connected for a second. Sorry about that.
No worries. You're good. What were you gonna say? Shout out to what now?
Oh, just shout out to the video game Outer Worlds, because they somehow managed to craft that game in a way that you can literally murder every single person in the game, and there's still a path forward to the end of the game. Like, so you can't actually just murder everyone who gives you quests in that game.
See,
But
every
anyway.
game needs that. Every game
Yeah.
needs that, just in case, right? Oh my gosh, that's so good. Well, there we go. That's our time killers, and now we're gonna wrap up this very brief and breezy show. Just a breezy 2-hour show, because that's just how we do it here on the Critical Podcast, with my personal favorite segment, which is community feedback and questions. And we got some great questions in from I think a lot of your like kind of friends over the GGD.
Oh, nice. Shout out, guys.
A shout out to the Great Game Debate, which again I've been on. It's fantastic. Let's start off with this one. There's so many good ones here. I don't know which one to pick first. Which, by the way, your next. Do you guys do? Is it bi-weekly with the Great Game
Yeah,
Debate?
we try to do bi-weekly. So we also just switched from doing it on Mondays to Saturdays instead. So we'll be recording our next episode this coming Saturday.
Okay, excellent. Good to know. First one comes in here from Rob Hudak. Hudak?
Mm-hmm. He's one of the Draft Punks guys, I believe.
Draft Punk size. I still have to figure out which one specifically is the Disney one, because I was told that like from their official account, there's like someone who's like the Disney guy. Is it Rob?
We didn't ask him, and it didn't come up at all. But the guy we had on our last episode from Draft Punks, Brian Keese, I just noticed in the background in his room he had a lot of Disney paraphernalia. Ooh. So he may be the guy.
Might be my guy. Might be my buddy. This is a two-parter. Question is this. It's actually at Raven named Rook. It says, what was your first weapon? And follow-up, is there a weapon that snuck up on you as a favorite? I'm guessing video game weapon, because if I had to say my first weapon in real life, it was my mind. No.
Could he be referencing Monster Hunter weapons?
Potentially. We are talking. I did ask about Monster Hunter Rise stuff in general, but I'm guessing we'll go with Monster Hunter weapons. I think is probably the best way to go. So, first weapon, which you did you talk about earlier tonight? I think you did.
Yeah. I started with Greatsword. It's really hard to resist the pull of a gigantic sword that just does huge amounts of damage in a single hit. And I did not deviate from Greatsword at all through the entirety of Monster Hunter Tri, and then the G rank version of the game, Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, came out on the Wii U. Played through the entirety of that with Greatsword, and Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, all Greatsword. Aerial Greatsword's totally broken in that game. And then my first playthrough of Monster Hunter World before my data got wiped, Greatsword, and then finally I branched out. So,
would you say Lance has overtaken just in your like heart for weapons?
It's probably about equal. It's kind of like a weird, like, like polyamorous thing where I'm like making out with the lance, but making like side eyes to the greatsword, and just thinking about going back. But it's like I'm so like polished on my technique with the lance right now that it's like hard to just like give that up and start all back over with the greatsword. But so I think maybe when like the big Master Rank expansion comes out on Rise, I might switch back to Greatsword. And it's sad because like the more weapons you become attached to, it just becomes a game of like wanting to play those weapons all the time, and it further reduces like the chance that you'll ever try out another weapon.
Yep.
So it's like I've got like Gunlance on the back burner, but it's probably not going to happen because I'm just going to play Greatsword. So.
That is so. I've just the way you described it as polyamorous, and like I just picture you like at like a party where it's like you have a long term relationship with like the lance, but like you broke up with the great sword, but it's like not actually over yet, and you're like, we had a bad thing happen.
The lance is like the lance is the reliable like long term life partner, that's dependable and can protect you, and then the gray sword is like the bad boy that like you have like the flings with.
Yeah, it's like that girl that you're not supposed to bring home, and like your parents are like, how dare you, and you're like, no, I'm with the lance now, and they'll be like, you better stay with that, you don't even look at it.
Yeah, the great sword is definitely like a metal satanist that wears like black eyeliner and has like a bunch of facial piercings.
That is amazing. I don't know if I can top what you said there, but I don't know if it was my first weapon, but the one that I really got involved with was the longsword. Surprise, surprise, a lot of people do. And I loved it so much. But then something changed, kind of like with Kaedhen. Iceborne came along, but even before that, I fell in love with this little thing called the hammer, and which was a great time to fall in love with the hammer because one of the leads on Iceborne was also a big hammer fan and wanted to buff up the hammer and make it even crazier.
Oh, yeah.
And it got that, and the hammer is so much fun. The only issue I have with it is the range. I wish it had the same range as the hunting horn, which I know would probably break it.
Yeah.
But sometimes I'm like, how did I miss? And I'm like,
you gotta get in there, dude.
You gotta really, like, you just miss the face a lot sometimes depending on the monster.
Yeah.
But if I'm like hunting like elder dragons or kind of larger kind of flying wyverns and I can't hit the face as much, and then you go over to like fighting an Oda-Garen or something and you're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna knock this thing down a lot. Like you can hit it, just spin into it,
just the ability to completely incapacitate monsters in World between mounting and clutch claw knockouts. You just add into that stunning them with the hammer with the KO damage. It's just like they just cannot like even get up off the ground.
I love just charging up and then just smashing into them when they're on the ground, and then they get knocked over again.
Dude.
Oh yeah,
it's just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So good. And then like the team's like, whoa, I get a few more seconds to hit because like the monster was laying down freaking out, and then it moved a few feet and did that same thing. It was like, I'm down again, and you're like, so
just
good.
A quick aside, the great thing about the hammer is it has a special kind of respect from other players that no other weapon has, because when you have a teammate using the hammer, the head belongs to the hammer user. You do not go near the head and interrupt the hammer user or trip him or otherwise disrupt his flow. You back off, you go attack the legs, you attack the tail, you leave the head alone. And no other weapon commands that kind of respect.
I wish that was a universal respect, but even in my own team, that was not something. I had to start putting like flinch free on because I was like, hey, you know what'd be fun? You stop hitting me. Like, it's like I can't. Yeah. You realize my attacks are slow, but yes, I love that when you have a team that knows what's going on. Be like, go get the tail. You have one job. You're like a blade user. Just get over there. The hammers. You like when you see two hammer boys out there, and you're like, all right, we're gonna do this together. All right, like you just stay on one side, kind of. I'll stay on this side. Yeah, the hammer, man. I adore it. I adore it. This is a question that comes in from @JHunterPearson. Mr. Hunter Pearson over there. Hi, how you doing?
Hey, Hunter.
He says, what do you want to see added / changed with the first major expansion to Monster Hunter Rise? This is a better question for you, I think.
Yeah, I assume this probably means like an Iceborne type expansion, like a big, huge paid expansion. But one other problem I have quickly with Rampages is that the hardest monsters in the game are exclusive to Rampages. They're called Apex monsters. And they're like deviant versions of monsters that already exist that have like more powerful move sets and can kill you easier. But you have to fight through an entire like three wave, tower defense rampage to even get to the apex monster. And then it's not really that much of a challenge because again, you just have all these cannons and stuff to shoot it with. And I would really love it if in the expansion or even before, they added hunts to fight the apex monsters like a normal traditional hunt out on the map and not in a rampage. And I guess kind of off of that, the apex monsters are basically just a rename of a type of monster that already existed in Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate called deviant monsters.
Okay.
And those monsters had their own separate gear from the regular version of that monster. So, for example, you've got a Rothian. Everybody knows the big green dragon that poisons you with his tail. The deviant version is called the Dread Queen Rothian, which is basically identical to the Apex Rothian in Rise. And its whole deal is it can project these giant poison spikes off of its tail and embed them around the map, and they produce like AoE fields of poison. And their poison is more powerful than average poison and kills you way faster, like drains your health faster. So really crazy fight, really hard. You have to be prepared for it and know what to do. But your reward is totally separate new set of Dread Queen Rothian armor and weapons separate from the regular Rothian weapons. And they always are better. Like they just are more powerful, have better skills, more skill points on them, and the weapons are just stronger than the regular weapons. So it's really worth fighting them. Whereas right now, the Apex monsters in Rise do not have any gear at all. Oh. There's no weapons and no armors. And you can't fight them outside of a rampage. So even if you could fight them outside of a rampage, you wouldn't want to because there's no reason to because they have no gear. So if they can just kind of, I hate to say it because the rampage is kind of like one of the big whole deals with Rise, like its main gimmick, but I'd like to see them put Rampage more on the sideline in future expansions and put more of a focus on the Apex monsters. That'd be really cool for sure.
Yeah, this, by the way, did the Dread Queen armor and stuff, does that like look different, or is it like kind of a reskin of like the regular Rathian armor stuff that looks slightly different?
I can't remember. Okay. I think it's most likely just a different skin of the same armor model, but could be wrong. But
these rampages sound a little bit like the siege quests that we love so much in World. It's like, I understand the concept, I just don't like the execution.
At least the siege missions were worth doing, as much as I hated them, because that was usually how you got the best gear in the game. But there's basically no reason to do the rampages. So
for me, who is not playing it, I'm just gonna say put that layered armor in there. Make it a thing. Do it for Kaedhen. Do it for everybody. Great question. This one comes in from I've never heard of this guy before. Wes Bates, like a demon cyber. So what? This guy was like like a demon cyber soul dragon punk. At Mecha on Twitter. Wow, my gosh, who's this guy? 2 questions. First one: if you could influence a change in the Monster Hunter formula for the betterment of the series, what would you change?
Influence a change. Let's see. I think if I could just get Capcom in general to stop trying to force weird gimmick missions into their games. Like in World, it was the siege missions. In Rise, it's the rampage missions. Like what the hunters want to do is just hunt the monsters. Like you're on the right track. Like better maps, more verticality, more open, more mechanics for fighting the monsters, new monsters. That's all good. Stop trying to make me play tower defense in a game about hunting giant monsters. Stop making me fight weird multiple phase 16 person but not really boss fights, siege mission. Like it's a mess. It doesn't make any sense. Like just stick to what people want and just polish that, hone that. Like I think that's what I do.
That's great. I completely agree with that, but I don't want to just say what he said.
Right.
I would say I really want to put in the monster hunting companion, even if you can only summon it for a little time. It doesn't even have to be like an Elder Dragon or something, but like just something that you've tamed yourself, almost Pokemon style, and it's back at your base, and you can call it in a few times, or maybe it could hunt with you, and you could just get rid of the Palicos, Palamutes. You're like, yeah, you brought in Tobi-Kadachi. I don't know why it comes back to Tobi-Kadachi for me. For some reason, I just think it'd be so cool to have when you you're like, I'm summoning Tobi-Kadachi, and then he would like fly in. He'd be like, and you're like, whoa, like my Super Snake Boy.
I saw him mention on Twitter, he's playing through Rise right now, and he just got to Tobi-Kadachi, and he was like, man, Tobi-Kadachi is just as fun to fight in Rise as he is in World. He's just an interesting monster to fight because his weak point is his tail, and most monsters are their head, so it's a different dynamic.
For sure.
Yeah, cool monster.
Which, do they have Barroth or Barryoth? I forgot in this game. Do
they have both.
They've got both. Oh, so they got my little rock T-Rex and my flying white saber tiger or whatever.
Yeah, and Barryoth is much more fun to fight in Rise of the World because he's much less mobile. He doesn't do that crazy thing where he just jumps halfway across the entire freaking arena. And like, I remember even if you bother to take the time to break his arms so that he trips when he like jumps like that, in World, he'll like land after leaping through the air and trip because his arms are broken, but he'll still like slide like 30 feet across the ground, so you just still can't get to him. So they fixed that in Rise.
He's tough. Okay, that's cool. Yeah. Or speaking of that, I would love to see more battle damage. But the problem is my Monster Hunter game is like M rated, which they're not going to make necessarily, I don't think. But like, I want to see, like, if I'm chopping off the tail, I want to see it hanging by like sinew and fiber, and then I'd be like, oh gosh, a few more hits, and that's it. You know. Yeah, I would just love to see some more of that battle damage-y stuff. What were you going to say now?
Oh, just piggybacking off of that, you made me think that I have always wanted just more, like the monsters to be affected more by the battle damage. Like, you know, like stuff like how with the Rothian you can chop its tail off and now it can't poison you anymore. Just more of that, you know, for all the monsters. That'd be cool too.
Break a wing and like it just can't fly?
M-rated, dude. Let's just get the blood gouts. When you amputate the tail, you know?
Yeah, like, right, because I think it's a T-rated series as is, and I get where that's the mass appeal, but like there's part of me that I want to, you hit like a vein on Nergigante.
Oh, God. Yeah, he falls to the ground and he's just like...
You just went over to it with the hammer, and you're just like... I also really... This is all going to be in that video, but I really want there to be, like... This is so sadistic. Like, executions... And, like, you as a team get to decide who gets that execution. It's like, all right, hey, the hammer user did a lot of work. And the hammer user goes over and just crushes the face. And they're like, all right, you're not going to get, like, any of the skull or, like, the fangs because you crushed it. But, like, oh, my gosh, that'd be so cool.
Capcom needs to hire Jimmy, dude. Like,
Capcom, let's go, baby.
He's got the ideas.
I got the ideas. Well, let's all tweet at them together. I'll start that tweet. I'm sure they're going to be like, put him on the blacklist. Never talk to him. And the other question comes, he says, if you could add a new weapon to Monster Hunter that doesn't currently exist, what would you add?
There's this dichotomy of some of the weapons between the blunt and the bladed. Like there's parallels between the greatsword and the hammer because they're both slow and they do a lot of damage, but the hammer has the ability to knock out a monster because it does blunt damage. So just in that vein, I think it would be really cool if they added some kind of like blunt, like fist weapons that were like as fast as the dual blades, but it was more like boxing and you could just knock the monster out, dude. That'd be sick.
Yep. It's like you read my mind. But the one that... Okay, so I love that idea, and I've been thinking about that for a while, because there's something about if you could run up and just crack a monster in the face. Like, you got power punches and stuff, too. Just some brass knuckles.
Some kind of rocket gloves. You just charge up the rocket. And
that's better. Yeah, the gun lance. Like, we took the idea of the gun lance, and we decided to put it on both your fists. And you're like,
exactly.
This seems like a great idea.
I think we're just turning it into Iron Man at this point. Just start flying around.
Dude, Iron Man would be... Hey, they put Aloy in this game. I'm not going to say they couldn't put that in. I really want, even though they kind of have it with the longsword a little bit, and the glaive to some degree, but I'd love a specialized moveset for a scythe. I'm a big scythe boy. If anybody's been watching the Dark Souls 2 streams, I just think there's a lot you could do with it. I think the armor sets and the weapons themselves could be really cool, and there's something that they haven't picked completely with that one, where it's kind of like a cross between a longsword and a glaive kind of thing, or kind of lance-ish, but yeah, I think it would be really sweet. It'd be kind of longswordy. It wouldn't be so much with the counters, but it'd be a lot of like kind of dashing through and kind of slicing quick and just kind of spinning it, you know, and like, it could be really cool. Cause like they have 14 weapon types. Is that what it is in the game or something
Yeah.
like that?
Now, they have had additional weapon types that haven't been in World and Rise in previous games. Mostly the
Oh,
online ones, they get really crazy with them. Like there's one game
dang.
where there's these insane like tonfas. So they're kind of in that vein of like a fast, blunt
Mm,
weapon, but they're these like rocket tonfas. So you can use them to like boost yourself up in the air and then evade like in the air with like
that's so
rocket
cool.
boosts. It's just crazy.
That is something I would love to see.
Yeah.
That would be. There's still something I think with your rocket fists. There's some like there are ideas there, and I get where the fear is because they have these 14 that they've had for so long,
Mm,
and there's like based stuff, and they don't. It's not so much a balancing thing, but like adding a new weapon in this game is not so much just like, all right, we just added this new thing. It's like no, there is so many considerations to
yeah.
make.
Like skills that affect the weapon and a model for like each of the monsters. But
Oh my
dude, yeah,
gosh, yeah.
kind of just combining this with like Hunter's question from earlier, that would be an insane addition for the expansion. Just like, and by the way, there's a 15th weapon type.
That
It's like,
would the
yeah,
Monster Hunter group would be like, oh my gosh, that'd be amazing. That would be really
yeah.
cool. Oh my gosh, yeah, dude, Magnamala fists. No, like just like yeah, oh my gosh, there's something to that, man. Like
Yeah.
the
Oh, do
rocket
you
launcher.
remember the Nergigante dual blades that are just like claws in
Oh, I
World?
think
Did you ever
maybe
see
I don't know
those?
if I maybe did see them.
Yeah,
They're
they're
like
so cool.
that is sick.
Yeah.
I got the long sword that like eventually is just in a cage, like on your back. Like the scabbard is just like a cage you put it in. It's
Yeah.
like I'm just so like trying to be so hardcore, like edge lord. I'm like
Oh
Nergigante is
yeah.
my favorite. I'm covered in spikes.
Yeah, dude.
One of my battle cries many times is just like, "Do you know what this armor is made from? Your grandmother." Like, just
Yeah.
run at him. It's just like, oh, now you really frustrated him. I want that. I want to be able to talk to the monsters. Can I like trash talk the monsters in a future game? Capcom, let's go. Like, I want to be able to yell at them. They're just like, oh, you've aggravated it. Yeah, man. Oh, but there's so many possibilities for weapons. But I would love to see the ones we talked about, and maybe a few more blunt. Even though like we talked, it's so hard because you have hammer and hunting horn. Like they kind of have axe with some of the weapons, which wouldn't necessarily be blunt. I don't know. There's something there. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I also would not want them to feel like they need to make another charge blade or switch axe or something that needs to be like super tricky. They totally can do that.
Yeah.
But I think with some of those, I'm like, you kind of have that. Makes I'd rather if you're going to introduce something like that, maybe also introduce something that's a little more newcomer friendly, or
Yeah, for sure.
just I feel like it's a lot. So. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thanks to everybody who wrote in. That's so cool. I appreciate that. If I missed your questions, please feel free to shoot them at us on Twitter and stuff like that again, or just kind of tag us later on. But if you ever have an idea for the show or a question or anything like that, all you have to do is tweet the hashtag Critical Podcast, and you can tweet at the official account for Critical Reviews, which is at Go Critical, or at me personally. I'm at JimmyGood013. As I tell people often, right now, send me an old Godzilla gif, like old school Godzilla. Like, is so good. But Kaedhen, if they want to find you on Twitter, man, where can they find you?
Well, I'm at Zora Caviar, as in like Zora's from The Legend of Zelda and caviar fish eggs. But
Yep.
the Great Game Debate has its own Twitter account now. If you just search Great Game Debate, it should come up. And I think there's a permanent link on the homepage of that account to join our Discord if you guys are interested in joining just a little community where people like to talk about video games and other pop culture, and we're all friendly.
Yeah,
So,
they've quickly are going to overtake and like eclipse the Critical Reviews here. It's just like, oh my gosh, no, it's great. I really recommend checking them out. Check out you guys have a video podcast like we were talking about earlier. You do bi-weekly. That's on YouTube as well, and that'll be under the Great Game Debate. And you guys just get together. There's like 3 or 4 of you as a panel, and then a guest usually, or multiple guests. So there's like a pretty wide and diverse group there who's going to be able to talk about stuff very thoroughly. And then you guys also kind of focus in on certain games via the Discord and stuff like that, where you're like, all right, we're talking about this week, and like like this one game.
oh well, we actually do. It's essentially like a book club, but for games. So yeah, if that sounds like something you're interested in, there's a specific channel like that on the Discord. So I just vote on a game, usually trying to go for something affordable and short to play over the course of a month, and then we have a group discussion with anyone in the Discord that wants to participate in it. So
Yeah, that's so great. I'm so happy that like you guys were on a few months ago and that it was interesting and fun enough that you wanted to go off and do your own thing, which is clearly successful for you guys. Just like even emotionally, because that's just kind of what I tell people. I'm like, just do it because you want to. Like it's just for fun. Don't do it. Be like, I will be the greatest podcaster. Like I will have so many people watching. But if you guys are interested, please go check that out. And if there's like, oh, I don't know, I really enjoy watching, me, that would be great. But there's, I think it's like episode, like 3 or 4 or something. I don't know which one it was. It was one of the earlier ones, I think. Maybe I'm off on that. Or was it more recent? I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. And we usually put the guest name in the title of the video, so if you just find the one that says Jimmy Good on it. So.
Yeah, go if like one person's like listens to this and then goes and watches that and tells the Great Game Debate that they came over because of me, that Jimmy sent you, that'll be incredible. That's a little synergy right there, baby. No, but go check them out. They're a great group of guys, and I had a really good time hanging out that one night, which was an incredibly long show. We had like some technical difficulties. I don't know.
Oh, that was right. Yeah, that was it
was so good.
We were having technical difficulties. Yeah.
Oh, it was so.
We have a redemption podcast.
That was so good. I just it's just so cool to see you guys doing that. So please, instead of checking out anything me or supporting anything for Critical Reviews this week, just go over there, go listen to them, please. Please go do that for me. That would be great. Like I said, if we get like one person to go do that. Yeah, of course. Well, thank you, Kaedhen, for being here and being like my Monster Hunter aficionado. And at least the one thing I could say about Rise,
on the ground floor.
Yeah, right. Like I could say about this with Rise is we finally got to play Monster Hunter together, and I'm really hoping, no matter what, with that sequel, just cross play. For the love of everything holy, just make it
for the love, dude.
For everybody, just everybody needs to play this.
At least like PC to Xbox, so then we can make it happen.
I just if Outriders peaked at 125,000 concurrent players one day, imagine what Monster Hunter World 2 could do if it had crossplay going like that first weekend alone. Like it would be server crash in heaven, baby. It'd be like Nergigante blew up my screen.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, it'd be. Let's face it, I wouldn't get to Nergigante that quick anyway. It'd take me a while, but anyway, that'd be so great. But anyway, Kaedhen, thank you so much for being on. I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course.
There we go.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. Thanks a lot for having me, dude.
Sorry,
connection issues. There's some lag there.
That's okay. I was like, well, you know what? No, thank you. Dude, we just roll with the punches here. It's so good. Either way, thank you for tuning in, everybody. And until next time, just remember to adapt and overcome.